I was reborn as a prince in a medieval world, and my first royal decision was to hire the witch everyone had gathered to burn. 7 minutes earlier, I had opened my eyes on an execution platform with a prince's coat on my shoulders and a torch waiting for my permission. Borrowed memories hit in broken pieces. Everett Mercer, 4th Prince, Hearthmere, border town, execution day. The square below me was packed with hungry townspeople, iron-capped guards, and a silver-robed envoy watching me like the verdict had already won. Sloane Vale knelt at the stake with nullstone cuffs locked around both wrists. Her face was pale from cold and exhaustion. Her wrists were raw where the stone had rubbed through skin. The executioner stood beside her with oil on his sleeve and a torch in his hand, smiling like killing her was the easiest part of his morning. The crowd wanted one word from me: burn. I had no idea how to rule a town. I barely understood the body I had woken in. I understood the torch. If I gave that order, my second life would begin with murder. The executioner leaned closer. "Your Highness?" I stepped toward him before fear could talk me into standing still. "Hand it over." His smile twitched. "The sentence has already been witnessed." "Good," I said. "Then everyone can witness this too. You are unemployed. Drop the torch." The torch hit the planks. For one breath, the whole square forgot how to be angry. Then Hearthmere erupted. People cursed. A child started crying. A miner near the well shouted that witches killed men in the tunnels. Guards reached for weapons because I had just turned an execution into a public argument. Sloane lifted her head. She looked at me with the exact expression I deserved. Suspicion first, hope nowhere near the room. Gideon Cross, my guard captain, spoke under his breath. "Her cuffs stay on. Nullstone is why this square still exists." Sloane's voice was rough. "This square exists because I chose to leave it standing." That should have scared me. It did scare me. Then I saw the blood-dark marks around her wrists and realized the town had chained the one person in the square who had shown restraint. "Open one cuff," I said. Gideon stared at me. "Your Highness, one." The fired executioner grabbed for the fallen torch. I shoved him back, and something silver snapped off his belt. The token rolled across the planks and stopped between Sloane's knees. Silas Baird, my steward, bent down, picked it up, and lost the last bit of color in his face. "Witness mark," he whispered. He gave testimony. The square changed again. The man holding the torch had helped condemn her, then climbed onto the platform dressed as a servant of justice. He had come here to finish the lie with fire. Gideon unlocked the right cuff. Heat rose from Sloane's palm, thin and blue at the center. Every blade came up. The crowd recoiled. Sloane looked at all of them, looked at the executioner, then closed her fist until the flame vanished. That was the first proof Hearthmere received. The witch they wanted dead had a better grip on her fire than the town had on its fear. I turned so the front row could hear me. "Sloane Vale, I am offering paid work. Emergency heatmaster, wages, food, guard protection, and no owner." Silas made a small, strangled sound. The crowd made a larger one. Sloane stared at me. "You are hiring the witch you were ordered to burn?" "Yes," I said. "My first royal talent appears to be disappointing murderers." "If this is another chain," she said, "put me back on the stake." "Then refuse me in public," I said. "Say no and I still do not burn you." A silver-robed envoy pushed through the guards before Sloane could answer. His voice carried over the square with polished disgust. "By authority of High Prior Malcolm Creed and the Silver Sanctum, mercy to a convicted witch is heresy." The old Everett and the borrowed memories would have swallowed that threat. The town expected me to do the same. I kept my eyes on Sloane and the witness token in Silas's shaking hand. Saving her had already exposed one lie. Hiring her was about to force every power in Hearthmere to react. The winter surge alarm rang from Hearthmere Keep before the envoy could say more. 3 hard strikes, a pause, then 3 again. Gideon went still. Even the envoy stopped performing holiness. A guard shouted from the street that the beacon below the Blackspire Range had lit red before season. The winter surge was early. The square had come to watch one woman die. Now everyone had to wonder who would die next. The alarm did more than end the execution. It made Sloane's fire valuable in front of the same people who had demanded her blood. "Second cuff," I told Gideon. He looked at the beacon smoke rising over the rooftops, then at Sloane's open hand. I saw the old fear fight the practical soldier inside him. Practical won by a thumbwidth. Gideon unlocked the other cuff but kept his sword ready. "If she burns this square, Your Highness, the guard will act." "If anyone attacks her first," I said, "the guard will also act." For the first time, the crowd heard me protect Sloane from them, not only from the executioner. Several workers stepped back. A few looked ready to throw stones. Then a bandaged miner near the well lowered his head. "She pulled my brother out." He said it quietly, but the whole square heard him. Sloane heard him. Her fingers trembled once before she hid them against her skirt. I did not call it gratitude. I had no right to name what she felt. I only knew the accusation had lost some of its certainty. Silas wrapped the token in his handkerchief and held it away from his coat. Your Highness, keeping this creates obligations. Good, I said. I was worried my first day lacked paperwork. He gave me the betrayed look of a man who had survived royal budgets and still found me personally exhausting. Then he tucked the token inside his coat. Silas wanted stability more than courage, but he understood records. That made him useful in the exact annoying way I needed. We left the platform for the holding yard behind Hearthmere Keep before the square tipped back into violence. Guards formed a loose wall around us. Sloane walked beside me instead of behind me. The envoy hissed, and the crowd whispered harder. I let them. Hiding her would have made the rescue look shameful, and the Silver Sanctum knew how to use shame. The holding yard smelled of wet ash and horse sweat. Panic supplied the rest. Sloane rubbed the red marks on her wrists. Gideon watched her hands. Silas watched the gate. I watched all three and tried to look like a prince instead of a dead office worker in expensive sleeves. You can refuse me in public, I told Sloane. If you work, you get paid. If you stay, you choose it. Her eyes stayed on mine. I pulled 3 miners out of a collapse, she said. A foreman grabbed me after. My fire burned him when I tried to get free. The witness swore I attacked first. My hand tightened around the token. The executioner flinched across the yard, which did excellent work for my opinion of him. If this offer means I belong to you, Sloane said, I walk back to the stake. The joke died in my mouth. My first life had ended under work lights, used up by people who called exhaustion loyalty. I knew what it felt like when a powerful person said opportunity and meant ownership. Then walk, I said. I will still block the torch. You should run, I told Sloane quietly. If you want to, I can hold them for a few minutes. She gave me a look sharp enough to deserve its own guard detail. Run where? Dawnshield. Keep hands witches to the Silver Sanctum when the fear gets loud. Hearthmere wanted to burn me. The roads want to kill everyone. She lifted one hand and let a tiny flame curl around her thumb, controlled and blue at the center. I can run later. Right now you need heat. That was Sloane's first choice beside me, and it mattered more than an oath. She stayed for 2 bad reasons. Every escape route was dangerous, and I had put one honest option in front of her. Trust was nowhere close. Choice was still a start. A rider reached the yard before I could answer, his horse skidding on the stones. The order in his hand carried Damon Mercer's mark in dark wax. Borrowed memories supplied the rest. My older brother Damon, polished, admired, and very popular with people who liked decorative princes and obedient border towns. Silas broke the seal, read 3 lines, and lost color again. Read it, I said. Silas swallowed. Prince Damon orders immediate evacuation to Dawnshield Keep. Hearthmere stores are to be transferred under royal supervision. Any detained witch is to be surrendered to Silver Sanctum custody. The envoy's face brightened so fast I almost respected the lack of shame. Gideon muttered a curse. That is the standing route. If the winter surges early, remove the town before dusk. Hearthmere's wall will not hold. The order sounded responsible, which made the trap worse. Burn Sloane or hand her over. Empty Hearthmere or watch it break. Either choice would prove I was the useless prince everyone expected. I had already died once after other people used me until nothing was left. I had no interest in repeating that life in a better coat. I asked Gideon one question. How many people make it to Dawnshield Keep when panic starts? His jaw tightened. Enough. That is a politician's number, I said. Try a captain's number. Gideon hated that. He also answered. Old people slow the carts, children get separated, workers fight for places. If blight beasts reach the river road before us, enough becomes fewer. The word blight beasts changed the yard. Sloane's flame shrank. Silas gripped the order. Even the envoy lost his smile. These were not monsters from a sermon. They were coming down from the Blackspire range, and Hearthmere had survived for years by running before they arrived. Running might still have been the right answer. I hated that. A useful plan had to protect living people, not flatter my pride. So I looked at Sloane's controlled flame, the token in Silas's coat, Damon's perfectly timed order, and the red beacon over Hearthmere Keep. Before sunset, I said, we test the north gate. Gideon stared at me. With her? With Sloane, I said. Paid, guarded, in public. Sloane's expression hardened. You want them to watch me burn for you. The accusation hurt because it was close to the truth. I want them to watch you choose what your fire does, I said. I need heat at the gate, but I need your choice more. If this still feels like a chain, say no. The north bell kept repeating its warning while Sloane decided. Then she opened her palm. The small flame returned, steady this time. One test, she said. And I keep my own knife. Gideon choked. Silas forgot to breathe. I nodded because my yes cost less than my refusal would have cost her. One test. Your knife. My guards keep the crowd off you. And the executioner? She asked. I looked toward the platform, where 2 guards held the man while he tried to hide behind his own outrage. He keeps breathing until Silas decides where witnesses go when they lie. Silas made a small wounded noise. That is a very serious accusation. Good, I said. Let it feel serious. The envoy stepped closer, scroll shaking in his hand. High Prior Malcolm Creed will hear that you armed a witch during a surge warning. Make sure he hears I paid her too, I said. A few people laughed, then looked guilty for enjoying it. I did not need the whole town to love Sloane by sunset. I needed them to see 1 lie, 1 free choice, and 1 use for her fire that did not end with a body on a stake. After I told Silas to stop looking personally robbed, he took a coin from my purse and placed it carefully in Sloane's palm. Emergency wage, he said, because even in a crisis the man needed a label. Sloane studied the coin, then closed her hand around it. She did not thank me. Good. Gratitude would have been easy and cheap. Taking the wage was better. The offer was real now. We returned to the edge of the square together. The crowd had changed shape while we were in the yard. Most people still looked scared, but they no longer looked certain. The fired executioner looked smaller without the torch. The envoy looked angrier without obedience. Gideon looked like a man preparing to defend an order he disliked because the alternative was worse. I climbed onto the bottom step of the platform. The execution is over, I said. My voice carried because the square wanted instructions more than it wanted truth. Sloane Vale is under my protection as a paid emergency hire. Anyone who attacks her attacks my order. The crowd stirred. Someone spat near the platform. The bandaged miner near the well raised his hand slowly. If the surge is early, he said, can she keep the north gate warm? It was the first public question that treated Sloane as a possible answer instead of a curse. The question was practical, frightened, and useful. I could work with that. We find out before sunset, I said. Gideon gathers the guard. Silas keeps the witness token and Damon's order. Sloane decides how much fire she gives. If the test fails, we move the children and injured first. If it works, Hearthmere gets a choice before anyone ships us away like damaged goods. The envoy shouted that my soul was in danger. I almost told him my soul had already survived corporate employment, but Sloane was standing beside me with raw wrists and a town judging every breath she took. The joke could wait. I turned toward the north gate. The red beacon burned above Hearthmere Keep. Sloane walked at my side with a coin in one hand and fire ready in the other. The crowd followed because they feared she might destroy them and needed to know whether she could save them instead. So I kept her beside me, pointed at the north gate, and told Gideon to gather every guard who still cared more about Hearthmere than doctrine. Sloane was alive. The execution was over. Now I had to prove hiring the witch could save the same town that had begged me to burn her. Saving Sloane was easier than convincing a town not to scream whenever she breathed smoke. We reached the north gate with half of Hearthmere behind us. The crowd stayed close enough to watch and far enough to run. The gate yard should have been loud with work. Instead, workers stood around frozen buckets, shuttered carts, and a gate winch crusted white from the morning cold. The winter surge beacons still rang over Hearthmere Keep, and every ugly note made Damon's order sound more reasonable. Evacuate. Transfer the stores. Hand over the witch. Very clean, very responsible, very convenient for everyone who was not chained, hungry, old, injured, or named Sloane Vale. I pointed at the gatehouse. We start there. Nobody moved. My first lesson in frontier leadership came fast. One royal order could stop an execution. It could not make frightened people trust fire. A mill worker with frost in his beard crossed his arms. She touches that gate, I leave. Another worker stepped back from a coil of rope. My brother works inside the mill. I am not putting him next to Witchflame. Sloane's face did not change, which told me more than if she had shouted. She held the coin Silas had given her, thumb pressed hard over the stamped edge. Paid work, no owner. I had said it in public. Now the town was making the words prove themselves. Gideon moved in front of her before I could speak. Your Highness, the gate is crowded. One spark hits dry straw and we have panic before we have a test. One blade points at her back, Sloane said, and your panic gets worse. Fair. Deeply inconvenient but fair. I looked at the workers. No one is forced to stand near her. Anyone who works gets paid. Anyone who leaves loses no ration today. Silas made a wounded sound behind me. He had known me for one morning, and I was already treating survival as more important than bookkeeping. A difficult start to our working relationship. The workers did not move. A few muttered. Others watched Sloane as though standing near her might spread something. The gate test was failing before it started, not because the plan was impossible, but because fear had years of practice and I had one morning. Then, metal shrieked inside the mill. A high crack tore through the yard, followed by white steam bursting from the low stone building beside the gate. The crowd turned together. Someone shouted that the mill boiler had split. Someone else yelled that men were trapped inside. Every argument about Sloane stopped. A door slammed open. 2 workers stumbled out coughing. A third did not. From inside the mill, a man shouted once. Then the sound cut off under another metal groan. Gideon cursed and grabbed 2 guards. "Axes! Now!" The workers surged toward the door, then stopped when steam rolled out hot enough to blister. The trapped man shouted again, thinner this time. The same people who had refused Sloane's help 10 breaths earlier started looking anywhere except at her. I hated recognizing the opportunity inside the accident. Sloane looked at the mill, then at me. "Do you want proof or a corpse?" Gideon snapped. "No fire in a boiler room." "Then send your men," she said. He did not answer. One guard tried to enter and stumbled back with his sleeve smoking. The trapped worker screamed my title. I had 2 choices: hide Sloane to keep the town calm, or let the town see exactly what it had almost burned. I stepped between Gideon and Sloane. "Can you reach him without lighting the place?" "If nobody grabs me," she said. "If nobody shoots me. If your captain stops looking at my hands like they are already guilty." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Blades down," I ordered. Every guard hated that order. Good. It meant they understood it cost something. Sloane did not move. I lowered my voice. "You can leave this yard. I meant that." Her eyes stayed on the broken mill door. Her expression tightened when the trapped worker shouted again. I knew only what she had told me about the mine and the foreman, so I did not pretend I knew every memory behind her face. I only saw her make the choice. "One worker," she said. "One honest use." Then she walked into the steam. The crowd drew back and leaned forward at the same time. I followed 2 steps behind Sloane because courage was easier after she had already entered, and because sending her in alone would make the rescue look like another prince ordering a witch into danger. Inside the mill, the heat stole my first breath. Wet stone, spilled grain, and broken iron filled the room. The trapped worker lay behind a fallen support beam with one leg pinned near the cracked boiler. Steam blasted from a thumb-wide split. Sloane lifted one hand. Every guard outside drew breath. I heard it through the door. Sloane heard it too. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. A narrow blue flame left her palm. It did not flare or spread. She pressed it against the crack until the metal glowed and the blast of steam dropped to a hiss. Nobody moved at first. The power everyone feared had just become the reason the trapped man could keep breathing. "Now," Sloane said. I grabbed the worker under the arms. Gideon came in, wrapped one arm around the beam, and shoved with an angry grunt. The beam shifted enough for the worker to drag his leg free. He cried out, and Sloane's flame flickered toward him. She killed it instantly. Her control mattered more than sealing the boiler. Sloane saw the worker's pain, felt her fire shift toward him, and killed it before anyone had time to accuse her. We hauled the worker into the yard. He hit the mud coughing, alive and bleeding. The crowd stared at Sloane through the steam. They had expected a monster. They saw a woman with raw wrists standing in a ruined doorway, smoke lifting from one hand, looking exhausted rather than triumphant. For 3 seconds the yard cheered. Then the cheer broke apart because Hearthmere remembered it hated witches and did not know what to do with gratitude. People lowered their hands. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else muttered that the worker might sicken later. Fear had lost one argument, so it immediately started another. The rescued worker pushed himself up on one elbow. He looked at Sloane, then at the crowd. Thanking her clearly cost him, but he did it anyway. "She saved me," he said. No one answered. He swallowed and said it louder. "Sloane Vale saved me." It was the first honest thank you Sloane received in Hearthmere. It fixed nothing, but it made denial harder. Silas shoved through the guards with a notebook already open. "Say that again." The worker blinked. "What?" "The exact sentence," Silas said, breathing hard. "Preferably before you faint." I almost laughed. Silas handled truth with the same care he gave an unpaid account, and for once I loved him for it. The worker repeated it. Silas wrote fast, then pointed at 2 other workers. "You saw the sealed boiler and the rescue?" They hesitated. One looked at Sloane, one looked at me. The second one nodded first. I saw. The nod did more than any speech I could have given. The town had watched Sloane save a life. Now named witnesses had to decide whether fear mattered more than the man still coughing in the mud. Gideon studied Sloane's hand. The suspicion stayed, but it changed. Before, he had treated her as a threat aimed at civilians. Now he saw a dangerous person who had just saved one. That was not friendship, but in Hearthmere it counted as progress. "Your hand," he said. Sloane curled her fingers. A red blister had opened along her palm from holding the seal too tight. "Still mine! I wanted to order a bandage." Instead, I checked my tone before care turned into another command. I looked at Silas. "Clean cloth. Pay time. Her choice." Sloane cut her eyes toward me. Not soft, not trusting, checking. I had started to learn that her trust did not arrive as warmth. It arrived as one less reason to leave. Silas handed over a folded cloth. Sloane took it herself. The crowd began talking all at once. The rescue had not made them kind. It had made them divided, which was more useful. One woman said Sloane should fix the gatehouse next. A man answered that witches always charged later. Another worker pointed at the smoking mill and said, if the witch could keep his brother alive, maybe she could keep a gate warm too. The rescue had not created love or acceptance. It had created a practical question: what if the condemned witch was useful, and what if burning her had almost cost Hearthmere its first real chance? I climbed onto an overturned grain crate before the argument could rot into another mob. The worker is alive, I said. The mill did not burn. Sloane acted under her own choice. Silas has witness statements. That is the record. The Silver Sanctum envoy pushed to the front, pale robe spotless despite the mud. The record is that you unleashed witchcraft inside a public workplace during a surge warning. Yes, I said, and it saved the worker your prayers were watching die. The yard went sharp and quiet. The envoy's face tightened. He held up a folded notice sealed in pale wax. By order of High Prior Malcolm Creed, Sloane Vale remains condemned. Any shelter, wage, tool, weapon, or public office granted to her is recognized as obstruction of sanctum judgment. You are ordered to surrender her before the second bell. The second bell was less than an hour away. The notice was the torch in cleaner form, official, cold, and designed for people who preferred cruelty with margins. The rescued worker tried to sit higher. She just saved me. The envoy did not even look at him. Contamination often begins with gratitude. Sloane went still. My anger came cold and focused. I kept my voice calm because raising it would have made permanent choices feel reasonable. I took the notice from the envoy. Silas, Your Highness? Record that the sanctum notice arrived after the public rescue, after witness statements, and before we finished the gate test. Silas's pen scratched at once. The envoy stepped closer. You cannot file your way out of heresy. No, I said, but I can make sure everyone remembers the order of events. Sloane looked at me. Blood had already spotted the cloth around her hand. She had saved a man who might still fear her tomorrow, then received one thank you and a fresh death order. Asking for more fire now would turn my offer into exploitation, so I did not. The gate test waits, I said. Sloane rests until she chooses otherwise. Gideon, keep the crowd off her. Silas, keep the statements. Everyone else, look at that man breathing and decide whether you want doctrine or a wall between your children and the Blackspire range. The workers did not cheer this time. Good. Cheers were cheap. Several of them turned toward the gatehouse instead of the road to Dawnshield Keep. That was better. The envoy raised the notice like it could block the beacon smoke. Second bell, Your Highness. I held up the rescued worker's statement beside it. Then, I guess we both brought paper. A few people laughed and then looked guilty. More important, the envoy looked smaller for half a second. Not defeated. Just smaller. Sloane stepped down from the mill doorway and stopped beside me, not behind me. Her burned hand was wrapped, her face was pale, her voice was low enough only I heard it. You are making enemies very fast. Apparently I am efficient. That was not praise. I know. For the first time, the corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. Then the winter surge beacon rang again, and the almost smile vanished. The worker was alive. The first witness statement existed. Sloane had one honest thank you and one fresh death order. I had proved her fire could save someone in public, which meant the people who needed her feared, had to move faster. By the time the second bell started tolling, I understood the new problem. Saving Sloane had been a choice. Defending her now required proof that kept surviving the people who wanted proof buried. By the next morning, half the town thought I had saved them. The other half thought I had adopted a disaster with pretty eyes. Sloane stood beside the north gate with one bandaged hand, one emergency wage coin, and an expression that said every escape route still ranked above me. The Silver Sanctum notice had not burned itself overnight, which I considered rude. Silas kept it beside the rescued worker's statement and Damon's evacuation order. 3 papers, 3 pressures: surrender, Sloane, abandon Hearthmere, or find proof strong enough to resist both. So I made another bad decision in public. I gathered the workers at the gate and said, no forced labor, paid wall work, food at midday, anyone who signs on knows the risk before they touch a stone. Silas closed his eyes and took the wage order personally. The workers stared at me with the suspicion of people who had heard richer men promise fairness and received bruises instead. I did not blame them. In my first life, emergency meant free overtime with better lighting and worse lies. I would not rebuild that system in a nicer coat. Gideon folded his arms. We do not have time to negotiate wages while the range spits monsters. We also do not have time for workers to run because they think I am turning them into royal meat shields, I said. The guards disliked that answer. The workers did not. That usually meant I had found the truth. Sloane watched me instead of the crowd. The bandage around her palm was clean. She had not offered more fire since the mill, and I had not asked. I wanted the wall test, I needed it, but powerful men had a habit of turning need into ownership and calling it strategy. I was trying not to become one of them. A young worker stepped forward. Paid in what? Promises? Coin where we have it, I said. Grain where coin runs out. Witnessed by Silas. Silas opened one eye. I am being volunteered for many things today. You are excellent at looking miserable in official ways. Two workers laughed. Silas took offense. For 1 second, fear stopped controlling the yard. Then someone dropped from the gate roof and landed in the middle of us. Gideon had a blade half drawn before her boots hit the ground. Sloane's fingers flexed and the workers scattered. The newcomer lifted both hands and grinned as though dropping from a roof was a normal way to attend a work meeting. Piper Hart, Gideon snapped. Use the stairs. The stairs are slow, Piper said, also guarded by people yelling about witches, which felt personally unwelcoming. That was how I met Piper Hart, Hearthmere's adult lookout, witch, bright-eyed, wrapped in a short travel cloak, and apparently unwilling to use a door. She pointed toward the river road before anyone finished glaring. 3 supply wagons are missing, she said. The ones meant for gatestone, pitch, and winter rope. They were on the road before dawn, now they are not. The yard turned ugly again. Gideon looked straight at the workers. Who took them? Every worker stiffened. The young one who had asked about wages stepped forward. You think we stole the wall out from under our own houses? I think fear makes people stupid, Gideon said. Then look in a mirror, Sloane said. The yard went silent. Gideon stared at Sloane, and she held his gaze. 7 words had insulted him, defended the workers, and reminded everyone she would not stay quiet to make them comfortable. Efficient. I raised a hand before the argument became our morning entertainment. No accusations without proof. Gideon hated that because he wanted order fast. The workers needed it because they had been waiting for the old version of authority to show up and start swinging. Piper, I said, where did the wagons turn? Toward the road to Dawnshield Keep, she said, but not by the main bend. Someone used the lower river cut. I looked at Gideon. We check it. Now? He asked. During the test? Especially now. Checking the road cost time, and every lost minute felt dangerous. But I would not build my first defense on a false accusation. If the workers had stolen from us, I needed proof. If someone had stolen from them, blaming the workers would help my enemies for free. I took Gideon, Sloane, Silas, Piper, 2 guards, and 3 angry workers who refused to let a prince investigate them from a safe distance. Frost hardened the road beyond the gate. The winter surge beacon had stopped ringing, but the silence gave us no reason to relax. Piper found a torn strip of wagon canvas caught on a thorn near the lower river cut. Deep, fresh tracks turned away from Hearthmere. Silas crouched beside them and studied the mud with professional misery. This was not panic, he said. This was ordered. One guard pulled a folded order from beneath the canvas. The wax had cracked, but the mark was still clear. Damon Mercer's seal pressed dark and neat into the fold. For a moment, nobody spoke. My brother had already ordered us to evacuate, transfer the stores, and surrender Sloane. Now the supplies for our gate test had been diverted toward Dawnshield Keep under his seal. I did not know his full reason yet. I knew enough to see that Hearthmere's failure helped him. The young worker pointed at the order. Still think we stole it? Gideon's face hardened. To his credit, he did not dodge. No. Say it to them, I said. Gideon looked ready to refuse. Then he turned to the workers. I was wrong. The sentence was short and expensive. The workers did not forgive him immediately, and I did not expect them to. What mattered was that Gideon withdrew the accusation in public. Silas tucked the diversion order into his coat beside the other papers. This should be copied. Later, I said. Right now it tells the workers the missing wagons were not their shame. Sloane looked at the tracks, then at the seal. Your brother moves fast, he has practice, I said. And you? I am learning under hostile workplace conditions, Piper snorted. Gideon did not. Silas appeared to be drafting my funeral in duplicate. We returned to the gate with fewer supplies and better evidence. The trade was bad, but usable. More workers had filled the yard while we were gone. They did not trust me yet. They had come because a living mill worker and stolen wagons made the danger impossible to ignore. I climbed onto the gate step. The missing wagons were diverted under Damon Mercer's seal. The workers did not steal them. The workers listened carefully, still deciding whether my words were safe to trust. I held up a hand before the crowd could turn on Damon too fast. Suspicion was useful. A riot with no food was not. We are not chasing wagons today. We are building enough proof that no one can call Hearthmere helpless and ship us away. Then I opened the emergency grain store. Silas made a sound that may have been a prayer or a small death. I ordered grain sacks brought into the gate yard and divided into work shares before the first stone moved. The shares were not generous, we were poor, and pretending otherwise would kill people later. But the grain was visible and real. A hungry worker could carry it home before risking a shift near Witchfire. The visible grain changed the yard more than my speech. Sloane saw it too. Her gaze moved from the grain to the workers, then back to me. You paid them before the test. I said I would. Princes say many things. So do bosses, I said, usually right before they ask you to bleed for the mission. Her expression shifted, not soft enough to call trust, but less closed than yesterday. Do not forget that. I am trying very hard not to become a man who needs that reminder twice. Gideon cleared his throat. Apparently complicated feelings were delaying the work. The wall channel was not impressive to look at. It was a shallow stone line across the gate mouth, ugly, unfinished, and missing half the materials Damon had redirected. Its entire job was simple: give Sloane's fire a path, make beasts hesitate, and prove the town could do something besides run. That was all the explanation the workers needed. Any plan I could not explain to frightened people in one breath was too complicated for the gate. Sloane stood at one end of the channel. How much fire? Enough to turn the charge, I said. Not enough to burn yourself proving a point. She glanced at my face. That was almost concern. Terrifying. I will file a complaint. The corner of her mouth moved. The smile was small, quick, and absolutely none of my business. My brain still noticed. Gideon set 2 guards behind a beast-sized timber shield, the kind used for training against a rush. The workers had soaked the front with water from the well. Nobody pretended it was the same as a blight beast. The point was not to defeat a monster made of wood. The point was to see whether men charging a gate would break stride when heat hit the line. Ready? Gideon called. Sloane kept her bandaged hand close and sent fire from the other. Blue flame ran low through the stone channel without reaching toward the crowd. The workers murmured as they realized her fire could follow a path and stop there. Charge, Gideon ordered. The guards ran the shield forward. 10 steps, 6, 3, the heat shimmered up. Steam exploded from the soaked wood, and both guards jerked back hard enough to slam into each other. The shield dropped. No one burned, no one died. The charge broke before the gate. For 1 second, everyone in the yard saw that the gate might hold. The workers shouted first, more surprised than proud. One man slapped the stone channel with his glove and yelped because it was still hot. Several people laughed at him. The yard finally had room for a sound besides fear. Gideon walked to the dropped shield, touched the steamed wood, and looked at Sloane. Again? The single word carried respect and another demand. Sloane's shoulders tightened, and her bandaged hand stayed close to her side. I recognized the pattern. Useful people got asked for more until they had nothing left, then everyone praised their dedication. Not yet, I said. Gideon looked annoyed. We need repetition. We need her standing tomorrow, I said. And the next day. 1 proof is enough for this morning. The workers heard that. Sloane heard it more. The young worker who had challenged me before stepped forward. If we finish the line, we get the grain shares first? You get them as you work, I said. No hero debt, no later promises. And if Damon calls us traitors? Then he can come say it to the people repairing the gate he stole from. The workers finally cheered. It did not fix the town, but it gave their anger a clear target. Silas wrote the wage order while looking personally injured by common sense. Workers began moving stones. Gideon ordered guards to carry instead of merely supervise, which amused the workers and offended the guards. Piper climbed back to the gate roof, ignored Gideon's order about stairs, and watched the road. Sloane stayed near the channel, but the workers no longer formed a wall of suspicion around her. One carried a bucket close enough for her to take. She declined, and he did not force it. Small choice. Real improvement. By afternoon, we had 1 working heat line, a public rescue story, a diversion order with Damon's mark, and workers who had received payment before obedience. It was not a finished wall. It was proof that Hearthmere had another option besides running. Then Piper whistled from the gate roof. Every head turned up. She crouched on the parapet, hair snapping in the cold wind. The grin was gone. Silver Sanctum rider on the south road, she called. He watched the test. Then he rode toward the lower wells. The lower wells fed half the town's water buckets. Sloane's flame died in the channel. I looked at the steaming stone, the workers, the sealed order in Silas's coat, and the road where the rider had vanished. We had proved the wall could work. We had also proved exactly where our enemies needed to press. Damon could reach our supplies. The Silver Sanctum was already watching our proof. And if the next lie landed near the wells, Sloane's first public victory might become the thing they used to hang her again. The Silver Sanctum did not attack us with soldiers first. They attacked us with a dead goat, a crying witness, and the confidence of people who had practiced lying in public. By the time Gideon and I reached the lower wells, half the gate yard had followed us. Sloane kept her bandaged hand close to her body. Silas came behind us, clutching his notebook to his chest. At that point, our records had survived more attacks than my authority. The lower wells sat below the market roofs and supplied half of Hearthmere. A lie there could spread through town before the water buckets did. A dead goat lay beside the main trough with black marks across its flank. From a distance, the marks resembled burned fingers. People stood far enough away to miss the smell and close enough to decide Sloane was guilty. The fired executioner stood beside the trough with tears on his cheeks and both hands lifted for attention. I had seen that man hold a torch over Sloane's chains without blinking. Watching him discover public grief after losing his job did not improve my mood. "I saw her fire near the well," he shouted. "Blue flame, same as at the gate. The beast Blake came after. She poisoned the water." Sloane stopped walking. The crowd turned toward Sloane with visible relief. A simple enemy was easier than uncertainty. The Silver Sanctum envoy stood near the well in pale robes and let the executioner do the lying for him. Gideon stepped closer to the goat, then stopped when the crowd hissed. "No one touches it." "Convenient," Sloane said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the square. "You wanted me burned this morning. Now your goat dies and you remember my face." The executioner pointed at her at once. "She mocks it." The accusation nearly worked. The crowd leaned toward it. Sloane's shoulders lowered, not in surrender but with the exhaustion of someone who already knew how much pain the square wanted from her. She looked at me. "If I go with them, does this stop?" My stomach went cold. Fear did not always need chains. Sometimes it made the hunted person surrender first because watching everyone else suffer felt worse. "No," I said. "It teaches them the price of lying is low." The envoy finally smiled. "Your Highness, the witch herself understands the danger she brings." "She understands mob math," I said. "That is not the same thing." The executioner cried harder. The performance was wet, obvious, and deeply punchable. Then a woman's voice spoke from the shadow beneath the trough roof. "If you are done admiring the tears, smell the goat." Every guard drew steel. Heat flashed once over Sloane's fingers. A woman stepped from behind the well stones with both hands visible and a knife at her hip. She wore a dark cloak, watched every exit, and looked unimpressed by all of us. "Sage Quinn," she said. Gideon swore under his breath. "Another witch." "A useful one, if your prince can use his nose," Sage said. She looked at me. "The witness cart, do not let him wash it." The executioner's face changed before the crowd understood Sage's warning. That reaction was her first useful proof, not a confession, just a guilty man's panic arriving too early. I walked toward the goat. The crowd shouted. Gideon grabbed my sleeve. "Your Highness, if the goat kills me, write down that I died doing advanced royal goat inspection." "That is not a plan," he said. "It is barely a sentence," Sloane muttered. "Good. If she could insult me, she had not fully decided to surrender herself to religious theater." I crouched beside the goat. The burn marks looked dramatic from 10 steps away. Up close, they smelled wrong. Not clean smoke, not Sloane's sharp blue heat from the gate channel. Greasy lamp oil clung to the hair, the same ugly smell that had come from the executioner's torch that morning. I stood and looked at the crowd. This goat was oiled. The envoy's smile thinned. "A witch can make any lie smell convincing." "That was almost a sentence," I said. "Try again with evidence." Sloane's eyes flicked to me. The square waited to see whether I would make her prove herself by burning again. I hated that the answer was yes. I hated more that the accusation would survive if we left it as my word against a dead goat and a professional liar. I turned to her. "Small flame, only if you choose." Sloane checked the goat, the well, the crowd, and Sage in the shade. Then she lifted 2 fingers. A low, controlled thread of blue fire appeared between them. I took a clean scrap of dry wool from a worker near the trough and held it near the flame. It browned and curled, no greasy smoke, no black streak. Then I touched the same scrap to the goat's marked flank. The wool flashed yellow and spat an oily stink into the square. People recoiled. "Lamp oil," Silas said at once. The man could identify evidence before most people identified danger. The executioner backed toward a cart parked under the well awning. Gideon saw him move and caught his collar before he made it 3 steps. "I was told to bring water," the executioner shouted. "I did not know what was in it." The crowd heard the wrong part first. Told, not blessed, not witnessed. Told. Sage leaned against the trough post. "He is improving. Earlier he was innocent." Silas went to the cart with 2 guards. He lifted a prayer cloth from the back and found a small oil jug wedged beneath it. The same greasy smell rolled out. Beside the jug lay a strip of singed rope and a handful of goat hair stuck to black paste. The square divided without anyone moving. Some people stared at the cart, others stared harder at Sloane because blaming her was easier than admitting the holy accusation had arrived with props. I pointed at the cart. "That is the miracle?" The envoy's face hardened. "You would trust a shadow witch over the sanctum?" "No," I said. I trust oil when it smells like oil. One worker laughed, then another. It was not enough to win the crowd, but it made the envoy's mouth tighten. Sloane let the little flame die. Her hand shook afterward. She folded it into her sleeve before the crowd could make a meal out of weakness. I wanted to ask whether she was all right, but the square was watching every exchange between us for ownership or fear. I kept my voice public. Sloane Vale did not burn that goat. The witness carried oil. Silas has the jug. Gideon has the witness. That is the record. The water is still cursed, someone shouted. The first lie had failed, so the crowd produced another. A woman near the back yelled that the grain store had witch wages in it. A man shouted that the wall rope was contaminated. 2 Sanctum supporters broke from the crowd and ran uphill toward the storehouse before Gideon could shove through the bodies. The envoy did not order them. He did not need to. His pleased expression made me want to solve the problem with my hands. Gideon, I snapped. On it! Gideon threw the executioner at 2 guards hard enough to ruin the man's dignity and sprinted uphill with half his squad. Sloane moved after him. I can stop a fire. I caught Sloane's arm, then released her as soon as she looked at my hand. Not in a storehouse full of pitch and panic, unless you choose it and have a clear exit. For half a second, anger flashed over her face. Then she looked uphill, where smoke had begun to climb over the roofs. You are going to lose materials. Yes, because you are stopping me. Because I am not spending you to fix a riot they started around you. The answer hurt because it was right, and being right would not replace the rope. We ran uphill anyway. The storehouse doors had been forced open, and workers were fighting workers. A lantern lay broken on the stones. Winter rope burned along one wall, and pitch leaked into the straw. The braces for the next gate channel had been dragged into the mud and hacked apart by people claiming they were saving Hearthmere from witchcraft. I had seen stupid workplace sabotage in my first life. This was worse. At least office politics usually did not come with torches. Buckets, I shouted. Water on the rope, sand on the pitch. Anyone breaking supplies loses ration priority until the wall stands. The ration consequence moved people faster than the fire orders. Hunger made the cost personal. Gideon slammed the flat of his sword against a support beam, and the crack of metal shut half the yard up. Back from the shelves! Sloane stayed at the storehouse edge with both hands clenched. People watched her, waiting for rescue or disaster. She gave them neither. Using fire around pitch would have helped the lie, so she held back. Her restraint saved lives and cost us supplies. By the time the smoke thinned, the rope was gone. 2 pitch barrels were wasted. Half the spare braces had snapped under boots and axes. The north gate still had 1 working heat line, but the second line had become a pile of expensive kindling and public stupidity. Silas arrived last, coughing, with the oil jug under one arm and open fury on his face. It was the most alive I had seen him all day. The witness card is secured, he said. The well water is clear. The goat remains unfortunate. Add the storehouse loss, I said. Silas looked at the wreckage and actually winced. I would rather be accused of heresy. Give it an hour. Sage appeared beside a broken shelf without crossing the yard in any normal way. Half the guards flinched. She ignored them and looked at Sloane first, not me. You did not run. Sloane's voice stayed flat. I considered it. Good. Thinking is healthy. Then Sage turned to me. The oil trick was sloppy. Sloppy means rushed. Rushed means they expected the well panic to carry itself. Who are they? I asked. Sage's mouth tilted. Earn the answer. Sage's answer was annoying and useful. She had not arrived as my ally. She was testing me. But she had exposed the oil in public, where the crowd could not pretend the evidence never existed. The crowd around the storehouse did not look convinced. Some people stared at the oil jug. Some stared at the burned rope. Some stared at Sloane like the broken supplies were her fault because the truth had failed to make them feel better fast enough. The damaged trust was the real loss. We had proved the goat was staged. Sloane had not surrendered. The executioner had been caught with oil. Sage Quinn had stepped out of the shadows and made the Sanctum's miracle look cheap. And still, Hearthmere ended the day with less wall, less rope, less trust, and more frightened people inside its own gates. Truth won the argument, but not the crowd. By dusk, the lower wells were open, the goat was gone, and the storehouse still smelled of smoke. I stood beside Sloane in the wreckage and understood the next problem clearly. The winter surge would not wait for Hearthmere to finish deciding whether we deserved to survive. The first blight beast did not wait for my wall to look heroic. It arrived while half my town was still arguing about goat evidence. The storehouse smoke had barely thinned when Piper dropped from a roof near the north gate, landed too hard, and skidded on one knee. That was how I knew the warning was bad. Piper Hart usually landed cleanly. Trail on the ridge road, she said. Fresh, big, coming fast. Gideon checked the unfinished gate and the broken braces beside the storehouse. I saw the calculation on his face. We had 1 working heat line, no spare rope, wasted pitch, frightened workers, and a crowd still divided over Sloane. We evacuate to Dawnshield Keep, Gideon said. The words hit the yard harder because he meant them. Gideon was not a coward. He was a captain staring at a damaged defense and choosing the option that kept the most people breathing. I hated that his reasonable answer matched Damon's order. If we run now, I said, the road decides who lives. Old people, injured workers, children, anyone without a cart. We already know how that math ends. If we stay, Gideon said, the beast reaches a gate we cannot finish. Sloane stood near the heat line, pale from the well square and the storehouse smoke. Then do not fight it at the gate. Everyone looked at her. She pointed down the narrow street between the mill wall and the old grain sheds. There, it cannot turn wide, it cannot rush the crowd all at once. It was the first time Sloane gave Hearthmere a defense plan before anyone asked for her fire. She was not waiting to be aimed at a problem. She saw the same narrow street I did and chose how to use it. I turned to Gideon. Street trap. He grimaced. That street has civilians. Then we move them. Nobody asked for a speech. Gideon sent guards door to door. Piper ran the roofline and shouted people out of upper rooms. Workers dragged carts into the narrow street to make a funnel. I ordered the well buckets brought up, and the people who had rioted near them carried water without arguing. Good. Their shame had finally become useful. The first roar came from beyond the north gate before the trap was ready. I had heard the word blight beast several times by then. The name had not prepared me. The creature that slammed through the outer ditch had black bone under frost-matted hide and too many teeth and a head held low for charging. It crossed the ground faster than anything that size should have moved. The crowd broke backward. Gideon shoved through the panic. Hold the street! A guard pushed a worker out of the beast's path and took the claw meant for him. The beast's forelimb caught the guard across the ribs and threw him into a cart hard enough to splinter the wheel. He hit the stones and did not scream, which scared me more than screaming would have. A woman forced her way through the crowd before Gideon could order her back. She wore a plain wool cloak, had gray streaked hair, and moved with calm purpose. Move, she said. Piper grabbed my sleeve. June Alder. June dropped beside the mauled guard and pressed both hands over the torn armor. Warm light spread under her fingers. The bleeding slowed. The guard supped in one brutal breath and started coughing. The crowd went silent again. Apparently Hearthmere had more hidden witches than anyone had bothered to tell its new prince. June's face drained white. Her shoulders dipped. She kept her hands steady until the guard's breath evened out, then she pulled back and merely fell. I caught her by the elbow. Can you stand? Yes, June said. Her shaking knees said otherwise, but she clearly planned to keep helping until she collapsed. 3 people reached for her at once. One begged her to look at his brother. Another grabbed her sleeve. I stepped between them fast enough that my borrowed prince reflexes finally earned rent. Nobody touches June, I said. Nobody asks twice. She chooses who she heals, and if she says, stop, stop, means stop. June looked at me, not grateful, just measuring whether the boundary was real. The witches in Hearthmere treated basic decency as something that might be withdrawn without warning. I was starting to hate how often that made sense. The beast hit the first cart barrier. Wood burst across the street. Workers scattered. Sloane lifted both hands, and the heat line answered too hard. Blue fire raced along the stones, climbed the broken cart, and roared high enough to make the nearest roof steam. For one terrifying second, the beast stopped. Then it lunged sideways through the smoke. Sloane pushed more fire into the line. Too much. Her face went gray, and the flame shook with her hand. She was trying to compensate for the broken wall, the lost supplies, and the crowd's fear by spending herself in public. I reached her before she fell. Back! It gets through if I stop! Then it gets through with you alive! She looked furious, but her knees buckled and she let me pull her 2 steps behind the cart line. Letting me help was not weakness. It was the first time she trusted my judgment during a fight, and I felt the weight of it. The beast came through the steam. I saw the buckets along the street and finally had a useful idea. Water on the stones, I shouted. Not at the beast, on the hot stones. The first worker hesitated. The rescued worker from the mill grabbed a bucket with both hands and threw water across the burning line. Steam exploded up between us and the beast. Then another worker did it. Then another. The narrow street disappeared behind white heat and wet stone. It gave us the cover we needed. Gideon! I shouted. He was already moving. Gideon took 6 militia through the steam from the side alley, low shields up, spears forward. The beast struck blind and hit wood instead of flesh. Sloane, breathing hard beside me, sent one controlled lash of fire along the ground, not at the crowd, not at the roofs, just across the beast's forelegs. The beast stumbled. Gideon drove his spear under its jaw. The militia hit together. It was not clean or polished. There was mud, steam, shouting, one guard slipping on spilled water, and another screaming for more pressure on the shield. They held long enough for Gideon to wrench the spear higher. The blight beast thrashed once, slammed into the cart barrier, and dropped hard enough to shake dust from the sheds. For a second, nobody believed it was dead. Then Piper landed on a broken cart and yelled, "If it moves again, I am retiring from rooftops." The laugh came out thin with panic and relief. People needed one sound that was not screaming. Gideon kept his spear in the beast until the body stopped twitching. Then he looked across the steam at Sloane. "Sloane!" Sloane was still leaning against my arm. She made herself stand straight before she answered. "Captain, the line held because of you." It was not an apology. Gideon did not give those easily in public. But he had credited Sloane where the crowd could hear him, and that was respect. June checked the mauled guard again, then sat down on a crate before her legs made the decision for her. The guard reached for her hand. "Thank you." June gave him a tired smile. "Keep breathing. It makes my work look better." Several people laughed softly. Then they looked at June with the same desperate need they had aimed at Sloane. Help became exploitation quickly when frightened people saw no other answer. I raised my voice before that hunger found hands. June healed one man and nearly dropped. She rests now. Anyone who argues can explain to Gideon why they want our healer unconscious before the next beast. Gideon did not smile. He turned his bloody spear slightly, and nobody argued. The rescued worker from the mill stepped into the open street. His leg was still wrapped from the boiler rescue, and he had stood up one side of his face from the bucket line. He looked at Sloane, then at the crowd that had blamed her beside the well less than an hour earlier. "She saved me in the mill," he said. No one interrupted him this time. He pointed at the dead blight beast. "She saved us here too, her and the healer and the captain, so maybe stop calling every woman who keeps you alive a curse." It was not a polished speech. It was better. The man had feared Sloane, and his bandages proved she had saved him anyway. The crowd could dismiss me as a reckless prince. It had a harder time dismissing a neighbor who was alive because the condemned witch kept choosing restraint. Sloane looked away first. I pretended not to notice. She deserved privacy for whatever the words had done to her. The street changed after that. Not fixed. Changed. Workers who had recoiled from Sloane now made a path for her to sit. A woman brought water to June and did not touch her. A guard who had drawn steel at Sage an hour earlier helped Piper down from the cart before Gideon could yell about roofs again. Hearthmere had not become enlightened. It had become embarrassed in front of witnesses. I could work with that. Then the rider arrived. He came through the north gate in royal colors while his horse shied from the dead blight beast. Damon had managed to be awful on schedule again. The rider held out a sealed order. "By command of Prince Damon Mercer." Nobody cheered that name. Yesterday that would have scared me. Today, after the dead beast in the street, it felt like a small payment. I broke the seal myself. Damon's message was brief and efficient. Hearthmere had to abandon the town before nightfall and transfer its remaining stores to Dawnshield Keep. If I refused, royal support would end and every later death would be recorded as my fault. The trap was clear. Damon waited until our wall was damaged, the crowd was divided, and the surge had become real. Then he offered obedience as the only responsible way to survive. Gideon read the order over my shoulder. His face tightened, but he did not say evacuate this time. Sloane sat on an overturned crate with one hand pressed to her ribs, still pale from overusing the channel. June rested a few steps away after saving one guard. Piper watched the road without making a joke. The dead blight beast in the street proved Hearthmere could survive, but it also showed the cost. The crowd waited for me to choose which danger we would face. I folded Damon's order and looked at the street we had just kept. "Tell my brother we received his concern." The rider frowned. "Is that your answer?" "No. My answer is that Hearthmere just killed its first blight beast without running to Dawnshield Keep. If Damon wants the town abandoned, he can come explain why survival offends him." The refusal did not feel like victory. It felt like accepting the next attack in public. The first beast was dead. June had revealed herself. Gideon had respected Sloane in public. The rescued worker had changed the crowd more than my title ever could. Damon answered our first real win by cutting off royal support. The battle had proved we could survive the monsters. Next, I had to prove we could survive the people who preferred Hearthmere helpless. Damon's order arrived after the crowd watched us kill a blight beast. That timing made the problem clear. He was not afraid our defense would fail. He was afraid it might work. His rider waited beside a dead blight beast, an exhausted healer, a pale fire witch, and a crowd that had just survived without my brother's permission. The order in my hand demanded evacuation before nightfall. The body on the stones proved another answer already existed. The rider treated my refusal as a delay. "Prince Damon expects compliance." "Prince Damon expects many things," I said. "That seems emotionally difficult for him." Nobody laughed much. The joke had come from fear, not amusement. Sloane sat on the overturned crate with both hands tight over her ribs. June leaned against the wall, still pale from healing the mauled guard. Gideon kept his spear planted in the dead beast until he was certain it would not move. Silas held Damon's order with both hands. Then Sage Quinn stepped out from the smoke beside the grain shed. Every guard flinched. Sage ignored them. She held up 3 torn strips of paper and a little bundle wrapped in oilcloth. If you want to know why your brother cares, stop arguing with the delivery boy and read what the order answered. The rider snapped, "That woman is a witch!" "Good eye," Sage said. "Did the horse tell you?" I took the papers before the rider could get brave. The handwriting was broken across folds and water stains, but the important words survived. Gate supplies diverted, winter stores transferred, Dawn Shield, keep and take credit, Hearthmere labor count. Silas went still beside me. I looked at him. Plain words. He hated plain words when they were dangerous. He used them anyway. When Hearthmere evacuates, Dawn Shield Keep receives our grain, ore labor, carts, and royal credit for sheltering us. The street quieted. Silas swallowed and kept going. If Hearthmere stays, Dawn Shield Keep loses the stores and the claim that we cannot survive without them. The papers did not reveal every hidden order, but they proved the main point. Hearthmere had not merely been neglected. Dawn Shield Keep benefited when our town failed on schedule. The rider tried to take a step back. Gideon noticed and moved one boot into his path. Sage tossed the oilcloth bundle to Silas. He opened it and found a small ledger strip, a snapped seal edge, and a bit of dark gray stone wrapped in cloth. Sloane saw the stone and went rigid. "Nullstone," she said. The word silenced the street. Raw cuff marks still circled Sloane's wrists. Every witch understood what the stone meant, and even the townspeople who feared them stepped away. Sage looked at me. "The Sanctum Trail follows the same winter route. I do not have the whole answer yet. I have enough to know someone is moving fear, supplies, and orders through the same chain." I understood the limit. We had enough evidence to act, not enough to claim every private detail. The truth would only help us if I kept each accusation inside what the papers could prove. Silas compared the broken seal edge to Damon's diversion order from the river cut, then to the new abandonment order. His mouth tightened. "Same courier chain," the rider said. "Those are stolen fragments." "Yes," Sage said. "I stole them from people stealing a town. I am devastated by the moral tension." The crowd shifted toward the rider instead of away from Sloane. Workers looked from the dead blight beast to the road to Dawn Shield Keep. The beast had frightened them. The papers showed them who benefited from that fear. I could have turned that anger loose. It would have felt good for about 10 seconds. Then Hearthmere would have burned its last strength yelling at a rider while the winter surge kept moving. So I folded Damon's order and handed it to Silas. "We go to the charter hall." Silas blinked. "Now? Now!" Sloane stood too fast, swayed, and caught herself before I could reach for her. "What charter?" The question was calm. The fear under it was not. I looked at the dead beast, the torn orders, June's exhausted face, Sage's stolen fragments, Gideon's bloody spear, and the people waiting to see if I was about to use proof as another leash. A public one. If Hearthmere survives because witches choose to help, then Hearthmere protects witches in public. The rider barked a laugh. "You cannot write away heresy!" "No," I said, "but I can make cowardice more expensive." We moved through Hearthmere with the crowd behind us. Nobody sang or cheered. The dead beast had been dragged aside, and the blood on the street kept everyone focused on what the charter needed to protect. The charter hall was a long room inside Hearthmere Keep with weak candles, cold walls, and a scarred table. Silas laid the evidence in a straight line. Damon's abandonment order, the diversion order, the witness token, the oil record, the rescued worker's statement, and Sage's fragments. He kept the nullstone scrap wrapped and far from Sloane and June. Sloane stood at the far side of the table, arms folded. "A contract with a prince is still a contract with a prince." Everyone heard the accusation. I was glad they did. Private reassurance would have been easier. Public mistrust was more honest. "Yes," I said. Silas closed his eyes at my answer. I kept going before he could object. "A pretty chain is still a chain," Sloane said. "You can write wages and protection and choice until the ink feels kind. The paper still sits in your hand." The room went quiet enough for the candles to sound loud. My first instinct was to defend myself, which meant I needed to listen. Sloane was not attacking my feelings. She was naming the part of my plan that could become coercion if I got frightened enough later. "Then the charter cannot be about what I get from you," I said. "It has to be about what no one gets to take." June lifted her head. "Rest." I looked at her. "If this paper protects witches," June said, voice soft but flat with exhaustion, "then it protects the words stop, healing, fire, shadow, wind, any of it. Stop means stop, even if people are bleeding and afraid." Several townspeople flinched because they remembered grabbing for her after the beast attack. "Good. Memory was doing its job. Write it," I told Silas. Silas sat with his pen and the expression of a man being ordered to commit treason in neat handwriting. "Your Highness, the wording matters." "Then make the wording short enough people can remember it while panicking." His offense at that was personal, but his pen moved. Gideon stepped closer to the table. The guard needs authority to protect them from the crowd and protect the crowd if a power breaks control. Sloane's eyes cut to him. Gideon did not look away. I said if. I watched you pull your fire off a wounded man in the mill. I watched you hold the street line without burning civilians. I am not calling you a monster. For Gideon, that was a major public concession. Sloane's face did not soften, but the room relaxed slightly. The captain who had wanted her cuffed yesterday had just admitted, in front of guards and workers, that fear was not evidence. Write that too, I said. The guard protects chartered witches from seizure, mob punishment, and forced service. If someone breaks the law, we judge the act, not the blood, not the rumor. The words were simple. The cost was not. Silas wrote while I paced. Sage watched the door. June sat only after I pointed out a chair without ordering her into it. Sloane remained standing. I left that choice alone. When Silas finished the first draft, he read it aloud in a steady official voice. He feared every sentence and committed to each one anyway. The Hearthmere Charter recognizes any adult witch within Hearthmere's protection as a free citizen or free hire, never property and never surrendered by rumor. No witch may be forced to use power or denied wage, rest, witness, or guard protection because of witch blood. He paused, throat tight. Nobody spoke after the sentence. It was not a perfect law or a complete system. It was a public rule written during a monster winter. That mattered because everyone had been changing the rules whenever witches needed protection. Sloane stared at the paper. I did not ask whether she liked it or trusted me now. One decent paragraph did not earn either answer. I signed first because the risk belonged on my name before I asked anyone else to touch it. Silas almost refused. Then he took the pen and signed as witness. His hand shook once. He hated treason and vague promises, but the evidence had made neutrality impossible. Gideon signed next. The guards behind him shifted. One of them whispered, "Captain." Gideon did not turn. I watched Sloane Vale help kill the beast at our gate. I watched June Alder save a guard I would have buried. If the guard accepts their work, the guard witnesses their protection. The captain's statement changed how the workers regarded the charter. Nothing changed completely in Hearthmere, but Gideon had put his authority behind the witch's protection in public. June took the pen after him. Her fingers were still weak. She read the rest line again before she signed. Then she looked at me. If people beg, you can say no. If you beg... The room went silent because the answer mattered to everyone. I looked at her, then at Sloane, because the answer mattered to both of them. Then you can say no louder. June signed. Sage did not sign. She crossed her arms. I do not sign things I have not tested. You stole evidence for a prince you do not trust, I said. That feels like a hobby with paperwork nearby. Do not get sentimental. It ruins your face. Sage's refusal did not bother me. Her value was proof, not obedience. She had brought the fragments and kept her distance. The charter had to protect choices that did not flatter me too. Then Sloane reached for the pen. Everyone watched Sloane reach for the pen and pretended not to stare. Sloane read the line about free hire. Then the line about no forced service. Then the line about no surrender by rumor. Her thumb brushed the raw mark on her wrist where Nullstone had cut skin. If you break this, she said quietly, I will not ask permission to leave. Good, I said. She looked at me. That is your answer? Yes, if the only reason you stay is because I can trap you, then I have already become the problem. My sarcasm stopped. Sloane had survived the stake, saved a worker, helped kill a beast, and still had to ask whether safety was only another form of ownership. Her question made me angry at the world and careful about my own authority. Sloane signed last. No flame rose, and nobody became better because a pen scratched paper. June released a long breath. Gideon lowered his chin. Silas pressed sand over the ink. Sage watched Sloane instead of me, and her suspicion looked more protective than hostile. I picked up the charter and carried it outside. The crowd waiting in the keepyard had grown. Workers from the gate, families from the mill street, guards with beast blood still on their boots. People who hated witches, but hated being used a little more than they hated being wrong. I read the Hearthmere charter aloud from the steps. I did not perform it. I did not make it noble. I kept my voice plain because plain words survive panic better. When I finished, nobody cheered at first. Then the rescued worker from the mill raised his bandaged leg a few inches and said, "About time." The rescued worker's comment broke the silence. A few workers clapped. A woman who had called Sloane cursed at the well looked down at her hands. One guard started toward June's chair, remembered the rest clause, and stepped back. The charter had already changed one person's behavior. The Silver Sanctum answer arrived before sunset. A silver-robed rider entered the keepyard with 2 guards, and the posture of a man certain heaven endorsed him personally. He carried a black-edged summons sealed in pale wax. Silas saw the seal and whispered, "Full heresy summons!" The rider read it in the yard so everyone could hear. By order of High Prior Malcolm Creed, I was summoned for sheltering condemned witches, obstructing sanctum judgment, arming heresy during the winter surge, and corrupting Hearthmere with unlawful charter protection. Then he named Sloane. Gideon's guards moved before I ordered them, not forward, around her. Sloane noticed. So did the rider. So did every person in the yard. The charter had not made us safe. It had made the next attack honest. I took the summons from the rider, folded it once, and handed it to Silas. Record that Malcolm issued this after the charter was read and after Sloane helped kill the first beast. The rider's mouth twisted. High Prior Malcolm Creed will not be intimidated by your little town. He should try it, I said. We are developing a terrible habit of surviving things meant to impress us. The line earned a few hard smiles. Then I looked at the charter in Silas's hands and felt what it had cost us. Damon had threatened to cut us off. Malcolm had named us heretics. Dawnshield. Keep Still waited down the road with food, walls, and a system that profited every time Hearthmere ran scared. But Sloane's name was on the charter by choice. June's rest was public. Gideon's guard had moved to protect witches without needing a speech. Sage had shown me the first real piece of the road beneath Damon's trap. I had wanted proof that Hearthmere could survive without using desperate people until they broke. By dusk, I had signed that promise in front of witnesses. Now the witnesses had to live long enough for it to matter. The charter sounded noble until hungry people stood outside my gate and our grain stores could not feed them. The first knock came before dawn. It was panicked, hammering against the outer gate, loud enough to bring guards to steal and workers out of bed. I reached the gate yard with my coat half-fastened and the Hearthmere charter less than a day old. Sloane was already there. She stood near the inner winch with one hand close to her knife and the other wrapped from the day before. June followed, pale but upright. Silas arrived with a ledger and the expression of a man who had already counted our food twice. From the other side of the gate came a child's cough. The child's cough changed the yard faster than any order. A monster roar would have been easier. This danger was a sick child waiting outside our gate. The guard on the wall looked down at me. Refugees, Your Highness. Maybe 30. More on the road. Silas closed his eyes. We cannot take more mouths. I know, I said. I mean, we cannot take more mouths and keep our own people fed. I know that too. The gate shook again. A man's voice begged from outside. He said Dawnshield Keep had turned them back. He said the main road was blocked. He said there were children freezing in the ditch and a woman who had not woken since midnight. The yard waited for me to choose the cruel version of practicality. The charter had been easy compared with this. Paper did not eat. Refugees did. Sloane looked at me, not pushing, not pleading, checking whether my mercy stopped where the food did. I hated that the answer had to cost something real. Open the outer gate one cart width, I said. Children, injured, and sick first. No weapons inside. South yard shelter only until we count the road. Silas made a strangled sound. Count the road. If there are more, I want to know before I pretend 30 is the problem. The guards lifted the bar. Cold air entered first, followed by people exhausted from the road. A man carried a child under his cloak. Two older women held each other upright. A young mother stumbled in with a feverish boy tied to her back. Nobody looked like an invading army. That made the choice harder, not easier. Hearthmere's own people gathered behind us, and fear sharpened fast. We barely have grain for ourselves, a worker shouted. Another pointed at Sloane. Now witches bring strangers too? Sloane's face went blank in the way I had learned to dislike. She was hiding the hurt before the crowd could use it. I turned on the worker. The gate opened because I ordered it. If you need someone to blame, use the prince. I have been called useless before. My schedule can handle reruns. A few people almost laughed. More important, the blame moved from Sloane to the person who had actually opened the gate, me. June stepped toward the feverish boy. His mother pulled back when she saw June's hands glow faintly. He is burning up, June said. The mother looked around, then at the charter nailed beside the inner gate. She could not read it from that distance, and perhaps not at all. But she saw guards giving June space and Sloane standing beside me without chains. Please, the mother whispered. June looked at me. I answered before the crowd could turn that look into permission. Your choice. June knelt. She placed 2 fingers against the boy's forehead, and warm light moved under his skin. Not bright, not dramatic. Just enough that his breathing eased and his fingers unclenched from his mother's collar. The whole yard exhaled. Then 3 refugees surged forward at once. My wife next. My father cannot walk. Please, healer, please. Before June finished helping one child, desperate people were already reaching for more. June swayed. Sloane moved first. Not with fire. She stepped between June and the reaching hands, and her voice cut clean through the yard. Back! The refugees froze because Sloane clearly meant the word. I stepped beside her. The charter applies at the gate. June stops when she says, "Stop." Anyone who grabs her leaves the shelter line. One refugee stared at me like I had slapped him. "She can save people." "Yes," I said, "and people are not wells you drain because you are thirsty." The sentence silenced the refugees and Hearthmere's workers. It also hit me. I had needed that rule in my first life, and no one had ever enforced it for me. June finished with the boy and sat back on her heels. "Water, sleep, warmth. I can look at 2 more before sunrise. Then, I stop." I repeated it louder. 2 more, then she stops. Nobody liked the limit. That was how I knew the boundary was real. Silas pulled me aside while guards guided the first refugees into the south yard. 2 more becomes 10 by noon. The shelter becomes permanent by dusk. If the next wave comes, the grain breaks. Say the ugly part. He looked toward the refugees, then toward our own workers. If we feed everyone, we may starve together. If we refuse them, Damon gets bodies on the road and calls you murderer. Silas stated the trap plainly. Close the gate and let people die on the road, or open it and risk starving the town slowly enough for Damon to call it failure. Sage appeared behind Silas, which made him jump so badly he almost threw the ledger. Damon will not need to wait for bodies, she said. He already blocked the main road. I turned. You saw it? Sage shook her head toward the wall. Piper did. Piper dropped from the parapet, landed badly, and caught herself against a barrel. Her usual grin was gone. The missing grin worried me more than the limp. Main road to Dawnshield Keep is closed, Piper said. Royal barricades. Damon colors. They are waving through carts with seals and turning everyone else toward the river cut. The refugees started murmuring. Everyone in Hearthmere understood that Damon had redirected these people toward our gate. Silas looked sick. He is forcing the choice. No, I said. He is forcing the blame. Piper held up cloth torn from a barricade rope. Dark wax clung where a seal had been pressed. Silas took it with steady hands. He was still afraid, but fear no longer stopped him from working. Sloane looked past the refugees toward the open gate. If Damon sends enough people, your charter becomes a fire starter. Only if we let him decide what it means. And what does it mean when there is not enough food? I did not have a clean answer. Any clean answer would have been a lie. I looked across the south yard. Refugees huddled under patched awnings. Hearthmere workers held smaller bowls and tried not to look at the children. June sat beside the sleeping fever boy. Sloane stood between the healer and the crowd without anyone asking her to. It means we feed the sick and children first, I said. It means Hearthmere workers eat too. It means no one gets to call hoarding courage or generosity treason. Silas exhaled through his nose. That is not a plan. It is the part people can hear without turning into animals. You and I can suffer over the rest in smaller voices. Silas gave me one sharp nod. That was enough agreement for both of us. By mid-morning, the second wave reached the gate. Not 30, closer to 60. Too many children, too many old people, too many people with frostbitten fingers and stories that all ended the same way. Dawnshield Keep soldiers had blocked the road, pointed them toward Hearthmere, and told them the useless prince had witch fire to spare. The phrase passed through the yard quickly. Witch fire to spare. A refugee man repeated the phrase while thanking Sloane for heat. His gratitude was real, but so was the insult. Her shoulders tightened, and I remembered the raw marks on her wrists. No, I said loudly enough for the south yard. Sloane's fire is not spare anything. She chooses each use. Hearthmere does not own her because Damon wrote a rumor with his mouth. The refugee man looked confused. I meant no harm. Most people do not, Sloane said. They just arrive with a need and call it harmless. Her answer stopped him more effectively than my anger. June lifted her head from the crate. I am done until sunset. The yard resisted the decision. People looked from coughing relatives to June's pale face, then to me and the charter nailed by the gate. I did not soften it. June is done until sunset, I said. Water, blankets, and ordinary hands until then. One refugee cursed. A Hearthmere worker snapped back that ordinary hands were the only reason the awning stood. They almost fought over a blanket until Sloane picked up the blanket, walked between them, and placed it over the sleeping fever boy. No flame, no threat, just a choice so plain both men looked embarrassed. People feared Sloane's fire so much that they kept missing what her restraint exposed about them. The south yard settled into order, not peace. Children stayed near the inner wall. The injured went under the awnings. Hearthmere workers received grain by shift, refugees by need. Everyone disliked the line and still asked me where to stand. Near noon, a silver-robed messenger slipped through the outer gate with the third refugee wave. I did not see him at first. Silas and I were arguing over whether old flour from Hearthmere Keep was safe enough to use. The answer was uncertain, which matched most of my rule. Sage saw the messenger. She did not stop him. That bothered me later. At the time, she only moved along the shade of the wall, eyes fixed on the pale sleeve threading through the crowd. The messenger reached Sloane near the water barrels. I saw him bow. I saw Sloane's hand go still on the cup she was filling. I saw him say something too low for me to hear over the yard noise. Then he offered a folded paper sealed in pale wax. Sloane did not take it at first. The messenger said one more thing. This time Sloane took the paper and slid it into her sleeve. I started toward them, but a fight broke out at the shelter line before I made it 3 steps. A Hearthmere man shoved a refugee away from a breadbasket. The refugee shoved back, and a child fell between them. I went to the child because immediate harm mattered more than a secret letter in that moment. By the time the fight was stopped, the silver-robed messenger had vanished back through the gate. Sloane was still by the water barrels. Her face had gone blank and controlled. "What did he want?" I asked. "Sanctum poison," she said. It was not a lie, it was an evasion built from enough truth to make a second question feel intrusive. Before I could push, June called for help with an old woman who had collapsed near the awning. I looked at Sloane for one more second. She looked back at me like she was daring me to turn concern into command. So I let it go, respecting her answer was right, failing to understand the threat was not. Sage stepped beside me as I moved toward June. "She hid the paper." "I saw! You did not ask! I asked once!" Sage watched Sloane over the crowd. "Once is polite. Polite does not keep people alive." I wanted to tell Sage that trust did not survive interrogation. She was still right that politeness could miss danger. Neither argument would help the collapsed woman, so I moved. June did not use healing this time. She ordered warm water, dry cloth, and room to breathe. The old woman woke coughing because ordinary care reached her before panic demanded a miracle. The small recovery mattered. June's rest had not reduced our mercy. It had forced everyone else to help. Then Piper returned from the wall with worse news. "More comin' by the Brindle River Road," she said. "And riders behind them, not close yet." Damon's blockade had turned one choice into a funnel. Malcolm's summons had turned our protection into heresy. Now a sealed message sat in Sloane's sleeve, and the woman I had written a charter to free would not look directly at me. I stood in the south yard with hungry refugees inside my gate and angry townspeople counting every scoop of grain. June rested because the charter held. Piper watched the roads Damon had blocked. Sage watched Sloane, and Sloane held a secret she had not chosen to share. Opening the gate had been the right thing. It had also given every enemy another way to pressure us. The sickness arrived with the refugees, and the timing made Malcolm's notice look prepared rather than prophetic. The next wave reached us from the Brindle River Road near noon. 2 people collapsed before the guards could search them. A child coughed so hard his mother had to keep him from biting his tongue. More refugees pressed behind them until Gideon Spears forced a line. June was on her feet before I gave an order. She heard pain and ignored what helping would cost her. Sloane moved with her, one hand near her knife and the other still wrapped. The sealed Silver Sanctum paper remained hidden in that sleeve, and she kept the arm stiff against her side. Sage noticed too. Gideon ordered the gate narrowed. "Stick to the south yard, everyone else waits outside the second line." The refugees hated the narrowed gate. Hearthmere hated the sick entering at all. One worker shouted that road fever would spread through town. Another blamed the witches. People who had watched June save a child now stared at her hands as though healing itself could carry sickness. Then a silver-robed priest shoved a notice up on the inner gatepost. He did not need a name. The pale wax and sanctum robe announced his authority. The notice claimed witch contamination had followed the Hearthmere charter. It said sheltering Sloane Vale and June Alder had brought sickness before judgment. The notice had arrived too quickly to be an honest response. The sick child convulsed again, and the mother's scream cut through the notice better than any speech I had. June looked at me. Her face was already pale from the last round of healing. "Your choice," I said. June knelt. The yard went silent, not with hope but with desperate expectation. Her light moved under the child's skin. His coughing slowed, and his fingers released his mother's sleeve. The mother sobbed into both hands. For 1 second, the notice on the gate looked as false as it was. Then 3 more refugees surged toward June. Sloane stepped between them before Gideon could move. No flame, no threat, just her body in front of June and one word: back. A man with blood on his scarf pointed at the notice. "She caused it. Let the healer fix it." His sentence exposed the trap, blamed the witches, then used them until they collapsed. I climbed onto a grain crate near the water barrels so the yard could see me. June heals 2 more people, then she rests until she says otherwise. Anyone who grabs her leaves the shelter line. Anyone who repeats that notice as fact can explain why Malcolm's paper arrived before the second sick cart was unloaded. The priest lifted his chin. "High Prior Malcolm Creed speaks for the sanctum." "The sick child breathing speaks louder," I said. The refugees murmured, and the priest glared at me. I had become familiar with that reaction from bad authorities. June healed an old man whose lips had gone gray, then a girl who could not stand without shaking. The yard grew quieter as June weakened. By the third case, sweat covered her hairline despite the cold. When she reached for another patient, her hand missed by an inch. I caught her wrist gently. Stop! June tried to glare at me. It came out blurry. There are more. I know. They are scared. I know that too. Her mouth tightened, but she sat on the crate Sloane pushed behind her. This was the charter's real test. People were coughing, June could help, and I still had to protect her right to stop in front of everyone, a refugee woman shouted. So we just watch them die? No, I said. We use water, warmth, clean cloth, and hands that are not collapsing. June is not the whole town's emergency ration. The words were simple. The reactions were not. Some people looked ashamed, others furious. Several stared at June as though I were withholding their family's only chance. Desperation was understandable. It still did not give them ownership of her. Sloane took the first bucket. It was only a bucket, but Hearthmere had reached the point where a condemned fire witch touching water became a public crisis. She set it on the stones, held both hands low, and heated the water until steam lifted in a thin white curl, not boiling, not showy, just warm enough for cloths, hands, and shaking children. A man near the gate muttered that witch fire and water was how the sickness spread. Sloane looked at him. Then do not use it. He went red because his wife was already dipping a cloth into the bucket for their coughing daughter. When Sloane was angry, she did not decorate the point. She stated the choice and let the man face his own hypocrisy. More buckets followed, and Sloane warmed them one at a time. Piper carried messages between the gate and the south yard. Gideon placed guards between June and the crowd, then stopped people from tearing down the sanctum notice. Leaving it up kept the lie visible. Hiding it would only make some people trust it more. The panic did not vanish, but people started following instructions. Refugees stopped reaching for June and asked where to place the sick. Hearthmere workers carried blankets while complaining. A guard who had called witches trouble the day before held a cup while Sloane poured warm water. He did not thank her, but he did not flinch. That was progress. Then, a Hearthmere worker collapsed near the grain line. The whole yard snapped toward Sloane. A refugee sickness could come from bad water, cold, hunger, or the road Damon forced them onto. A Hearthmere worker collapsing made the notice feel true, even without evidence. The priest pointed at Sloane's buckets. The contamination spreads. Sloane's hand tightened around the bucket handle. Fire crawled once along the rim, then died because she killed it before anyone else could make the choice for her. I saw the effort it cost. So did Gideon. Enough, Gideon said, and his voice came out like drawn steel. The man was carrying sick children 10 minutes ago. Gideon's defense mattered because the crowd trusted his caution more than my defiance. June tried to stand. I stepped in front of her. No! The worker's wife screamed at me, and I let her. Her fear deserved room. While she shouted, Sloane handed me a warmed cloth. Piper brought water, and a guard helped the worker sit up. He coughed, spat into the mud, and kept breathing without June's healing. The recovery was small, messy, and important. I held up the cloth so the yard could see it. Not every sick person needs June's body spent on them. Some need warmth before panic turns them into proof for a man who is not even here. The priest's face twisted. You mock the high prior while your town coughs. No, I said. I mock him because he sent a notice faster than help. The answer did not make the priest harmless, but it weakened his authority in front of the yard. Sage stepped out of the shade beside the inner gate. Gideon no longer drew steel whenever she appeared, which counted as progress. The notice was not the only paper, Sage said quietly. I kept my eyes on the yard. Where? South wall. A messenger passed a folded strip to the priest after the first collapse. The strip had road timing on it. Road timing, the implication hit immediately. Can you get it? Sage smiled without humor. I can steal it. Getting back politely may be ambitious. Sage, do not start caring now. It ruins your scary prince act. Then she was gone. I hated shadow walking as a concept, mostly because it made reasonable supervision impossible. I hated more that we needed it. The sickness panic was not random. The notice had been ready, and the priest had waited until our yard was full, our healer was drained, and Sloane was doing visible witch work with water. The panic was being timed, not merely preached. The next half hour dragged. June sat with both hands around a cup while people begged her to heal. Sloane warmed water and ignored the insults. Piper ran between the wall and the yard as more dust rose on the Brindle River Road. Gideon kept the line steady by making every order clear. Then the priest shouted, "Thief!" Sage burst from the side passage with her cloak torn at the shoulder and a folded strip in her fist. 2 silver-robed men chased her into the yard, and one carried a drawn knife. Trying to stab a woman in front of sick children damaged their holy argument considerably. Gideon's guards moved. Sage slid behind a water barrel, kicked a bucket into the first man's shins, and threw the folded strip to me. I barely caught it. The strip was damp, torn, and written in a tight hand. I caught only pieces before the priest lunged. Hold panic, third bell, rescue banners, contaminated witches. Not enough to prove every hand. Enough to prove the sickness notice had a schedule. The yard saw me read it. The priest saw the yard see me. That paper is stolen, he snapped. From the people staging panic? I said. That does not help your case. Sage was breathing hard now. A line of blood showed near her shoulder. Sloane saw it and stepped toward her. The priest pointed at Sloane like he had found a second sermon. See how they gather, he said. Witches protect witches before they protect the town. Sloane stopped. I wanted to answer for her. I did not. Sloane picked up the nearest warmed bucket, carried it past the priest, and handed it to the worker's wife who had screamed at me earlier. Your husband needs this more than I need to impress him. The woman took it. Her hands shook. Thank you. It was small, it was public, it broke the priest's sentence in half. Piper hit the wall stairs so fast her boots skipped the last 3 steps. She looked wind-burned and furious. Damon is marching, she said. The yard froze. How close? Gideon asked. Close enough that their front riders will see our smoke before sunset. Piper swallowed. They are carrying rescue banners, Damon colors behind them. Soldiers, carts, and a herald shouting that Prince Damon comes to save the sick from witch rule. Nobody spoke at first. The sickness notice, the refugee funnel, and the rescue banners had arrived in an order even frightened people could recognize. Not all of it, not the full link, not yet, but enough. The priest tried to smile. Then perhaps mercy arrives. Gideon stepped between him and the gate. Mercy does not need soldiers behind a sickness panic. Gideon's sentence redirected the yard. Guards watched the road instead of Sloane. Workers moved refugees deeper into the south yard. The sick remained sick. Food remained tight, June was exhausted, and Sage had exposed herself. Sloane still carried a hidden paper I did not understand, but the panic had stabilized before Damon arrived to harvest it. I looked at Gideon. Bar the inner gate. Sick and children behind the second wall. No one opens for rescue banners without my order. He nodded once. And if Damon calls that treason? I looked past the gate toward the Brindle River Road, where dust had started to rise behind the refugees. Then my brother can wait outside and explain why his rescue needed Malcolm's sickness notice to soften us first. We had stopped the sickness panic from breaking Hearthmere. June's boundary held. Sloane answered the accusation through restraint, and Sage stole the first-timed proof. The cost was that our enemies now knew exactly who stood against them, and now Damon was marching toward my gate under banners that claimed he had come to help. So I ordered Hearthmere into siege lines against an army carrying rescue banners. I found the pardon letter in Sloane's coat, and for one ugly second I understood why she had hidden it. We had moved June into Hearthmere Keep before her legs gave out. Sage sat at the table while someone wrapped her shoulder, and Sloane's wet coat hummed beside the hearth. When I lifted it away from the fire, the pale wax letter slid from an inner fold and landed face up at my feet. Sloane saw it before I picked it up. Nobody moved. Wind rattled the shutters. The seal was broken, and the offer was brief. The Silver Sanctum would pardon Sloane Vale, withdraw her death mark, and grant safe passage to Dawnshield Keep if she testified that I had forced her fire, corrupted Hearthmere through the charter, and sheltered witches for rebellion. Her confession had to arrive before Damon entered under rescue authority. It offered more than escape. It offered safety in exchange for making me the reason she needed rescue. I felt anger first, because I was human and still capable of stupidity. Shame followed. The letter had turned Sloane's survival into a transaction, exactly what I had promised never to do. Were you going to take it? I asked. The room went quiet. June sat near the hearth with a cup in both hands. Sage watched from the table with her bandage half tied. Gideon stood by the door ready for an enemy he could hit. Silas kept one hand over his records and looked deeply unprepared for the personal part of treason. Sloane crossed the room and held out her hand. Give it back. I did. Giving the letter back did not make me noble. It made an honest answer possible. Sloane looked down at the letter. Yes. Her plain answer hurt more than denial would have. For how long? I asked. Long enough to hate myself for reading it twice. I had expected denial, anger, or one of her sharp replies. The truth hurt more because I could not dismiss it as defense. Sloane folded the letter once. Her hands were steady, her voice was not. They knew what to offer. No stake, no chains, no one begging for fire, no one calling me spare heat with a polite face, just a road out before your brother arrived and turned me into the reason he saved everyone. I wanted to promise I would never let that happen. I stopped myself. A promise made under pressure would not erase the offer in her hand. And the price was me, I said. The price was saying, you owned what everyone already thinks you own. That was the ugliest part. She was not entirely wrong. I had defended her choice and written it into the charter. Still, anyone looking from outside saw Sloane beside a prince, using fire when his town needed it, and sleeping under his protection. The Sanctum did not need to invent ownership. It only needed to misname what people already saw. Sage tied off her bandage with her teeth. The letter was bait. Sloane did not look at her. I know! Do you? Sloane's head snapped up. Fire flickered at her fingertips, small and furious. Careful. Sage did not flinch. I am, that is why I am talking. I stepped between them before a wounded scout and an exhausted fire witch turned my war room into a personality contest with casualties. Enough! Sage, say what you found. Sage reached into her torn cloak and pulled out the folded strip from the sickness panic. Then she took out a second scrap, smaller, wrapped in dark thread. I stole one message and took half of another before the priest's friend noticed. They used the same courier marks Silas has been whining about for 2 days. Verifying, Silas said weakly, is not whining. You do it with the eyes of a haunted clerk, Sage said. Under other circumstances, I would have enjoyed the insult. I wanted the evidence more. Silas spread the scraps beside Damon's blockade rope, the heresy summons, and the earlier courier fragments. His fingers moved fast. He did not explain every mark because I would have thrown myself into the hearth. He only pointed where it mattered. Same route chain, Silas said. Same seal pressure on the fold, same courier spacing. This sickness notice was timed to the rescue banners. Gideon's jaw tightened. Damon and Malcolm. Silas looked at me before answering. Linked enough for witness copies. Not enough to name every private order. Enough to prove the panic and the arrival were coordinated. That was all the papers safely proved, and the limit mattered. We did not know every private order. We had the pardon letter, the timed sickness strip, the blockade proof, the charter summons, and Sage's wound from stealing evidence the Silver Sanctum wanted back. The evidence did not ease the tension. It made the danger more specific. Sloane stared at the letter in her hand. They wanted me to say Everett forced me before Damon came in to rescue everyone from him. Yes, Sage said, Sloane's mouth twisted. And if I refused? Nobody answered right away. I did because she deserved the plain version. Then you stay visible and they need another way to make you the problem. June's cup clicked softly against the table. That is not comfort. No, I said, comfort would be lying. Sloane looked at me, and I stopped hiding behind jokes. You should be angry, she said. I am. Some. She took that in without blinking. I hated saying it. I hated more that pretending otherwise would make the conversation fake, and fake mercy had nearly burned her once already. I am angry that you hid it, I said. I am angry that part of me saw the letter and immediately wondered whether I had been stupid to trust you. I am angrier that the thought showed up wearing my brother's voice. Sloane's fingers tightened around the paper. I kept going because the worst part still needed saying. I am scared because I need your fire for the battle outside. Needing you makes me sound exactly like every man you should run from. Nobody answered. Sloane's expression changed. She did not soften, but she stopped hiding the hurt. I waited for that sentence. Which one? The one where you finally admit the charter does not make needing me harmless. The answer was painful and earned. I looked at June, exhausted beside the hearth, Sage, bleeding through her bandage, Gideon, preparing to hold a gate against royal soldiers, and Silas, already sorting scraps for copies despite his fear. Then I looked back at Sloane. It does not make needing you harmless. The charter makes you no public and enforceable. She laughed once, low and without joy. And if I tell you no now, then I defend the gate without your fire. Gideon made a strangled sound. I ignored him. Sloane did not. Your captain disagrees. My captain wants to survive, Gideon said. His voice was rough but steady. So do I. That does not give me the right to order your hands into the flame line. Sloane looked at him for a long second. You have changed, Gideon grunted. Do not make it sentimental. The room finally breathed again. Silas interrupted for a useful reason. If we intend to turn this into public proof, I need copies before Damon reaches the inner gate. How many? I asked. Enough that losing one does not erase the truth. That is a horrible sentence. It is a horrible day. Fair. I handed him the timed strip. Sloane held the pardon letter for one more second, then placed it on the table herself. Placing the letter on the table was the first part of Sloane's answer. Silas did not grab it. He waited until her fingers left the paper. I noticed. So did she. The charter had taught him something even in the middle of a siege. Piper burst through the door before Silas finished sanding the first copy. Her hair was wind-tangled, her cheeks raw, and her usual grin had been replaced by a look that made everyone straighten. Damon's front riders reached the lower bend, she said. They are shouting for the gates to open to royal rescue. The herald keeps saying the sick will be moved to Dawnshield Keep and the witch threat contained. Contained. Sloane's face went very still. Contained was the next form of coercion. No chains yet, only a public word preparing people to accept them. I turned to Gideon. How long? Not long, he said. If we close everything, we look guilty. If we open everything, we hand him the town. Damon preferred choices where both responsible-looking answers gave him control. I looked at the papers on the table. Then we open one thing. Silas winced. Your Highness, that phrase has never introduced peace. The outer square, I said, not the inner yards. Refugees and sick stay behind Gideon's second line, witnesses where they can see, papers copied. Damon can speak to Hearthmere, not swallow it. Gideon nodded slowly. Controlled audience, guard keeps command. And Sloane? Sage asked. Everyone looked at her. Sage did not apologize. Do not pretend the letter is not the center of this. Damon expects her hidden, fled, or cornered. Sloane's eyes went to me. The room waited for the prince to choose where to place the witch. I hated thinking of her as someone to place, so I stepped away from the table and put distance between us. Sloane, you have choices before Damon reaches the gate. You can leave through the east postern with no confession and no debt. Gideon will spare 2 guards if you want them. You can stay inside with June and not stand in front of the crowd. Or you can stand in the outer square where Damon can see you chose not to take his pardon. And if I walk? She asked. My chest tightened. Then I hate it privately and defend your right publicly. No one moved. It was the clearest choice I could offer, and every option still carried a cost. A siege did not allow harmless decisions, but cost was not the same as ownership, even when the difference felt painfully narrow. Sloane looked at the pardon letter on Silas's table. Then at June, who could barely sit upright and still looked ready to argue. Then at Sage, who had stolen proof and bled for it. Then at Gideon, who stood by the door with a soldier's dread and a witness's spine. Finally, she looked at me. When I signed your charter, she said, I told myself it was only paper. It is. No, she said. It was paper when you wrote it. It became real when people obeyed it while they were scared. My throat tightened. I let the moment stand without a joke. Sloane picked up the pardon letter again, not to hide it this time. She handed it to Silas. Copy it. Read it if he lies. Silas took it like it weighed more than the whole table. I will. Then Sloane turned to me. I am not standing beside you because you need my fire. I know. Say it anyway. I understood then. Not for me. For the room. For herself. For every frightened witness who had heard men turn need into ownership and call it fate. You are not staying because I need your fire, I said. You are staying because you choose to. Sloane nodded once. Then put me where everyone can see it. Her choice gave me the answer I wanted and created the danger I feared. She would stand with us freely, in full view of our enemies. Gideon straightened. Then the guard stands with the charter. He opened the door and called 2 guards by roll, not by name, because we had no room for ceremony. Outer square line. No one touches Sloane Vale. No one takes June Alder. No one opens the inner yard without the prince's order. The orders moved through the hall and into the keep. Boots struck stone. Doors opened. Hearthmere prepared for the confrontation we had chosen. Silas packed the copies into 3 oilcloth wraps, one for himself, one for Sage, and one for the guard line. Sage took hers with her uninjured hand and gave me the smallest possible sign of approval. If Damon lies, she said, let him do it loudly. That is the plan. Your plans are very rude to quiet people. Then Damon will suffer. The joke was small. It stayed small. The real thing waited outside. We walked toward the outer square together. Piper ran ahead to the wall. Gideon formed the guard line. Silas carried the copied evidence. June stayed inside, furious at her own body but protected because the charter still meant stop during a siege. Sloane walked at my side, not behind me. In her left hand she carried no flame, in her right she carried nothing at all. That mattered more. At the gate, the first rescue banner rose over the road. The crowd saw Sloane before Damon did. Refugees whispered. Workers turned. Guards tightened around the square, not trapping her but making space. The same town that had wanted a witch burned now watched her stand openly with the letter that could have saved only her and doomed everyone else sitting in Silas's coat as proof. I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, I understood how exposed Sloane had become. Damon's expression changed when he saw Sloane beside me. Along with the timing and the rescue banners, that reaction showed what he had expected, a hidden, guilty, or absent witch. She was none of those things. She was visible by choice, and her testimony threatened his plan. It also made her the easiest person in Hearthmere to aim at. Damon came under white banners while his soldiers held refugees outside, and blight beasts screamed down the ridge. I stood in Hearthmere's outer square with Sloane beside me, Gideon holding the guard line, Silas carrying copied proof, and a crowd ready to witness every word. My brother rode through the smoke in a polished coat. When he saw Sloane alive and visible, his rescue smile failed for one satisfying second. Then Damon recovered his smile. Brother, he called across the square, stand down, royal rescue has arrived. The refugees outside the lines screamed as another roar rolled down from the Blackspire range. I looked past Damon's horse. His front soldiers had formed a hard shield line across the road. Refugees were pressed against it, begging to be let through. Behind the shields, sealed carts and noble riders waited in safety. In front of the shields, tired families watched the monsters get closer. "Your rescue is facing the wrong direction," I said. Damon kept smiling, but his eyes moved from Sloane to the workers and then to Silas's oilcloth packet. His reaction confirmed my suspicion. He had expected panic, sickness, a hidden witch, and a prince too desperate to resist. Instead, he had an audience. "I assume command of Hearthmere by royal authority," Damon said. "The sick will be transferred to Dawnshield Keep. The witch threat will be contained. Any resistance will be recorded as treason." "You practice that," I said. "It shows." A few people almost laughed, but nobody relaxed. Another roar rolled down the ridge as low shapes moved between the road pines. The first blight beast burst onto the slope behind Damon's formation. Damon lifted one gloved hand. "Protect the command carts!" His soldiers obeyed at once. His next order cost him Hearthmere. The shield line did not open for the refugees. It folded inward around Damon's riders, sealed carts, and protected passengers. A woman shoved a child toward the shields, and a soldier pushed them both back. The crowd saw it. The refugees inside our gate saw it. Silas saw it and reached for his pen. "Silas," I said. "Witnesses." "Already listening," he said. The first beast hit Damon's outer shields. Metal buckled. A horse screamed. Damon's formation tightened around the carts and left the road people exposed. Gideon looked at me. "If we open the side gate during a charge, we invite the beasts in. If we keep it closed, Damon decides who deserves to live." Gideon hated the answer. Then he turned to the guard line. "Side gate, second line holds, refugees through in groups." Piper was already moving along the wall. She struck the gate bell in the short pattern we had saved for a side entry, then kicked off the parapet and ran the wind hard enough that her cloak snapped straight behind her. The side gate bar lifted. Cold air and terror rushed in together. The first refugees stumbled toward us. Damon shouted, "Close that gate!" I shouted louder. "Hearthmere keeps its own gate." The order was easy to give and dangerous to survive. A second blight beast charged behind the first. Refugees ran toward the side gate in a broken wave. Gideon's guards forced lanes through the panic. Workers dragged carts across the side street, and Sloane stepped to the heat channel with a pale face and steady hands. I moved beside her, close enough to speak without making it an order. "Can you give one line?" Sloane looked at the refugees, then at Damon, then at the side gate. "For them," she said, "not for him." "For them," I said. Fire ran from her palm into the stone channel, low and blue across the gate mouth. The heat warmed the first beast hard enough to make it skid sideways. The refugees surged through the opening, heat at their backs, and Hearthmere guards shouting them forward. A little girl in a fine cloak fell near Damon's abandoned road line when a cartwheel shattered. I saw her go down. I also saw Damon look away from her because his command cart was moving. June saw her too. June had been resting inside the second line with both hands wrapped around a cup. She stood so fast the cup hit the stones. I caught her arm before she could run past me. "June! One child!" she said. Her voice was soft, her face was gray. Her choice was still hers. I let go. June crossed the open gap with two guards around her while Sloane's flame held the beast back. A claw struck the cart beside the girl, spraying broken wood. June covered the child, pressed a shaking hand to the cut in her side, and used just enough healing to slow the bleeding. Then, June collapsed. Gideon reached them before the beast did. He hauled June and the child behind a cart barrier, while two militia drove spears into the beast's shoulder. The beast thrashed, caught one spear in its teeth, and dragged a guard off his feet. Sloane's flames surged. For one breath, I thought Sloane would spend everything she had. Instead, she narrowed the line and drove a precise strip of fire across the beast's forelegs. It stumbled into the cart funnel, and Gideon rammed his spear under its jaw. The militia hit with him. The beast dropped. The second beast broke through the smoke right behind it. Piper dropped from the wall. "Third shape on the ridge. I heard two," I said. "Congratulations, the mountains are overachieving." The joke gave frightened people one breath. Piper grabbed a fallen banner pole, planted it in the mud, and used the cloth to signal the side gate line toward the inner yard. Refugees moved. Workers pulled carts. The guards began acting as one unit. Damon's soldiers, meanwhile, kept their shields around the carts. The crowd saw that too. The second beast hit our heat line and recoiled. Sloane staggered. I reached for her, stopped myself, and held out my arm instead of grabbing. She took it for balance without looking at me. "Still your choice," I said. "Terrible time to be honorable," she said through her teeth. "My whole reign has scheduling problems." Sloane gave a strained laugh, then sent one last strip of blue fire along the stones. The beast lunged away from the heat and into Gideon's line. Workers joined the guards. The rescued mill worker struck its side with a pick, and a refugee hooked its back leg with rope. They were untrained and furious. Together, they brought it down. The beast went down under spear points, rope, and steam. Damon had spent all week directing the town's anger at me and the witches. Hearthmere used that anger on the monster instead. The third shape on the ridge stopped at the edge of the heat shimmer, paced once, and withdrew into the smoke. Not gone forever. I was not that lucky. But the main wave broke. The side gate held. Refugees were inside our second line. June was alive, slumped against a guard's shoulder with the child breathing beside her. Sloane stood on her own feet, barely because pride and spite were doing most of the work. The square did not cheer. Everyone looked at Damon's formation. Behind his shield ring, Damon's white banners, carts, and noble riders were still clean, while the refugees he had come to save were alive, because Hearthmere opened the side gate after his soldiers closed ranks around Comfort. Silas raised his pen. Witnesses to the road line, who saw the shields turn inward? I saw, said the worker with the pick. I saw, said the mother holding the child June had saved. I saw, said 3 refugees at once. Damon rode forward and the crowd did not part for him. Enough, Damon snapped. The witch's fire drew the beasts to civilians. She is unstable. See Sloane Vale under Royal Rescue Authority. His soldiers moved. Gideon stepped in front of Sloane before I gave the order. Half his guard moved with him. The other half closed around June and the refugees. That mattered. They were not only protecting the powerful witness, they were protecting the exhausted healer Damon had nearly left on the road. I walked between Damon and Sloane. You want to seize the woman who held the line while your soldiers protected your carts? Damon's face hardened. Move. No. The word was small. The square made it large. A refugee woman lifted the child June had saved high enough for Damon to see the blood on the girl's cloak. You left her outside. The rescued mill worker pointed his pick at Damon's shields. Your men shoved people back! Another worker shouted. Sloane burned the line. Hearthmere opened the gate. The sentences came from everywhere, rough and overlapping. Damon had wanted a crowd when he arrived. Credit where it was due. He had brought the perfect audience for his own collapse. His soldiers stopped advancing because soldiers can ignore one angry prince. They have a harder time ignoring a whole square that just watched them abandon children. Damon tried to recover. He looked at the dead beasts, the refugees, the witness copies, then at me with pure polished hatred under his rescue smile. You have no idea what you are provoking. I know what I just watched, I said. So does everyone else. We were not safe. Damon still had soldiers, the winter surge still threatened us, and Malcolm still controlled the Silver Sanctum. But Damon's claim of rescue had collapsed in public. The town had watched him protect carts before children. Then the smoke behind Damon's line parted. High Prior, Malcolm Creed entered the square in spotless silver robes. The priest from the sickness notice followed with 2 pale-robed men. Damon gave Malcolm a quick, angry look that suggested familiarity. Silas, Sage, and Sloane all noticed it. Malcolm did not waste time pretending to rescue anyone. He looked at the dead blight beasts, Damon's stalled soldiers, the crowd turning against royal banners, and Sloane standing alive beside me. Then he lifted a sealed order and let his voice carry over the square. By emergency authority of the Silver Sanctum, Hearthmere's witch threat will now be handled by relic law. Sloane's fingers sparked once. Every guard around her moved. Damon had lost the crowd. Malcolm chose coercion instead. We had barely finished surviving Damon's rescue when Malcolm walked through the smoke holding a relic that made Sloane's fire die in her hands. The object under his silver cloth was a nullstone collar, dark, heavy, and shaped for a throat. I knew that stone from Sloane's raw wrists, from the scrap Sage had stolen, and from every flinch the witches tried to hide when the coif came off. Malcolm raised the collar for the square to see. Emergency relic law is now in effect. Nobody cheered. The square had watched Damon abandon refugees and Sloane hold the gate. Malcolm still had rank, fear, silver robes, and a relic that could silence witchfire. He no longer had a crowd ready to believe him without question. That made him more dangerous. Sloane Vale, Malcolm said. Step forward and submit. Sloane's hand opened. A thread of blue flame rose from her palm, thin but steady. The collar came closer, and the flame choked out before she could shape it. The square saw that too. 2 pale-robed men moved behind Malcolm. Gideon started forward. Damon's soldiers crossed shields in front of him, and Damon said, "Stand down. This is Sanctum jurisdiction." My brother was trying to distance himself from the coercion his soldiers were helping enforce. I moved for Sloane. Malcolm's men moved faster because Sloane was exhausted and the collar had already killed her flame. One seized her arm. The other snapped the nullstone around her throat. The lock clicked and Sloane dropped to one knee. For 1 second, I saw only Sloane and the collar. I had heard crowds scream, beasts roar, soldiers clash, and priests lie. The quiet click was worse. It put her back on the execution platform in front of the same town she had saved. I reached the first pale-robed man before I finished thinking. Gideon caught my shoulder from behind and held me back with both arms. "Your Highness, let go. If you swing first, Malcolm gets his riot." I hated him for being right. I hated myself more for needing the reminder while Sloane was on her knees with Nullstone against her throat. Sloane lifted her head. Her voice came out rough. "Do not give him that." Her order stopped me when Gideon's grip could not. Malcolm smiled. "The witch understands obedience when relic law teaches it." Sloane looked at him with open hatred and no fire in her hands. "I understand men who need collars because truth keeps escaping." The crowd reacted before Malcolm could hide it. A few refugees made rough sounds under their breath. A worker near the front laughed once, sharp and shocked. The sound failed to free her, but it told me the collar had not made her small. Sage moved. I caught only half of it. 1 second she stood near Silas with her wounded shoulder stiff under its bandage. The next, she was inside the smoke shadow beside Malcolm's sleeve, reaching for the small key at his belt. She almost had it. She missed by half a breath. Her injured arm slowed her by half a breath. A pale-robed guard slammed the lantern low, cutting the shadow under Malcolm's cloak, and another caught Sage by the hair and shoulder. Sage twisted, kicked his knee, and still lost the key. It hit the stones at Malcolm's feet. Malcolm stepped on it. "Sage Quinn," he said. "Shadow filth always returns to its hiding place." I looked at Damon. "This your rescue too?" Damon's soldiers had helped block Gideon, but my brother now tried to distance himself from the result. "I came to preserve Hearthmere. The High Prior acts under Sanctum authority." "Convenient," I said. "You abandon children under royal authority and collar women under someone else's." The crowd heard it, and Damon noticed their reaction. "Good." June tried to rise from behind the second line. She made it 1 step. Then her legs failed. The child June had saved grabbed her sleeve and cried. June pushed against the ground, but her arms could not lift her. Healing had a real cost, and the charter meant she did not have to pay until she broke. "June stays back," I said. June glared at me with wet eyes. "I know, I can try. You cannot heal a collar," Sloane said before I could answer. She swallowed hard against the nullstone. "And I am not letting him spend you, too." The square went quiet. Malcolm wanted witches to look selfish and dangerous. Sloane protected June's boundary while kneeling in a collar, and his claim lost credibility again, so he raised the stakes. "Everett Mercer," Malcolm called. "Confess before these witnesses that you claimed this witch, commanded her fire, corrupted this town through unlawful charter, and armed heresy against crown and sanctum. Surrender the Hearthmere charter, surrender the stolen records, and I will grant her a clean burning when judgment is complete." The square went cold. Clean burning. That was Malcolm's holy language for murder. Damon looked away first. "I did not. And if I refuse?" I asked. Malcolm's smile thinned. "Then the town watches what happens when a prince loves a weapon more than his people." The trap was clear. If I confessed, I called Sloane property and destroyed the charter in public. If I attacked, Malcolm got the riot he wanted. If I did nothing, Sloane stayed collared beside the old stake. I forced myself to look at the objects, not just the collar. The silver cloth around Malcolm's relic case had a dark oil stain. Pale wax marked the latch, and dark thread clung to the keyring. The same materials appeared in our earlier evidence. It did not prove everything, but it connected the relic case to the stage notices and courier chain. Malcolm had not arrived with faith, he had arrived with props. Silas saw me see it. His eyes dropped to the case, then to the oilcloth packets under his arm. He understood faster than his terrified posture deserved. Piper stood near the wall stairs, winded, dirt on her cheek, one hand half hidden in her cloak. The third witness packet was gone from Silas's bundle. "Good." I met her eyes for 1 second. She lifted 2 fingers, small enough that Malcolm would think it was panic if he noticed at all. Then she slipped behind the guard line and up toward the wall. I did not assume Piper would succeed. I only kept Malcolm looking at me. "You want me to confess possession," I said. "I want the truth," Malcolm said. "No," I said. "You want the one lie that makes every other lie easier." Malcolm's expression hardened. Sloane found my gaze from the stones. The collar had drained the color from her face. She swallowed against the dark band and did not beg. Her control made the sight harder to bear. The politically safe move was delay, ask for terms, demand another witness, and pretend to negotiate while Sloane remained on her knees. I refused to do that. I stepped toward Sloane. Damon snapped, "Everett." I ignored him. Malcolm lifted one hand, and the pale-robed guard tightened his grip on Sage's injured shoulder. Sage hissed through her teeth but did not cry out. "One more step," Malcolm said, "and the Shadow Witch joins the Fire Witch in judgment." I stopped, not because I accepted it, because Sage was also mine to protect under the charter, and I did not get to spend her pain for a dramatic stride. Real responsibility meant my anger could not spend Sage's body for a dramatic gesture. I turned slightly toward Gideon without taking my eyes off Malcolm. "Captain, here," Gideon said. "No one attacks unless I order it. No one lets the collar leave the square." Malcolm smiled. "You give orders like a man with power." "And you need a collar to talk to one woman," I said. The crowd shifted again. Malcolm heard it. He could still hurt us. He could still kill Sloane if we moved wrong. But the square was no longer giving him the easy fear his relic theater was built to collect. I pulled my dagger and struck the gate bell twice. To Malcolm, it was noise. To my people, it meant move witnesses before weapons. Silas flinched and gripped the remaining packets. Gideon moved 2 guards toward the side street without looking away from Malcolm. Piper vanished over the wall. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He knew something had moved. He did not know what. The signal moved. It was a small, dangerous success. Then I looked at Sloane and made the choice where everyone could hear it. "I will not confess that I owned her," I said. "I will not surrender the charter that says she can tell me no. I will not call her a weapon because your whole religion falls apart when a woman chooses to save people without belonging to anyone." Sloane closed her eyes for half a second. Malcolm's face changed. "Not much. Enough." His face said he had prepared for fear, politics, maybe rage. He had not prepared for me to refuse the exact sentence that would have saved my title and doomed the person beside me. "Then you choose judgment," he said. "I choose Sloane," I said, "and Sage, and June, and every person you tried to scare into thanking you for a cage." The line was larger than my usual voice. I meant every word. Malcolm raised the sealed order. "Clear the execution platform." The old platform still stood at the edge of the square, stained by smoke from the morning I had refused to burn Sloane. Workers recoiled when the pale-robed men moved toward it. Refugees pulled children back. Damon took 1 step away from Malcolm, then another, as if distance could erase the shields his soldiers had crossed in front of Gideon. Sage was forced to her knees beside the relic case. June could barely stand behind the second line. Sloane was dragged upright by the collar, and the sight put every joke in my body into the ground. The gate bell answered my signal with 2 distant strikes from the wall. Malcolm heard noise. My people heard witness! Then the last roar of the winter surge rolled down from the Blackspire Range, and Malcolm pulled Sloane toward the platform where my second life had started with a torch in another man's hand. Malcolm treated the collar as proof that Sloane was helpless. He had underestimated everyone standing against him, and he still treated them as irrelevant. He pulled Sloane onto the old execution platform while the last roar from the Blackspire Range rolled over Hearthmere. The crowd pressed back, and children cried behind the second line. Damon kept his horse near the road, close enough to claim credit and close enough to escape. Sage knelt beside the relic case with a guard gripping her wounded shoulder. June could barely stand. Piper was still gone with the witness packet. The situation was terrible, but it was also public. Malcolm had spent all week teaching Hearthmere to watch witches. Now I needed those witnesses to watch him. Malcolm shoved Sloane toward the stake frame. The nullstone collar kept her fire dead, but she stayed alert. She looked at the crowd, then at me. She did not beg or panic. I could not know what she thought. I only knew her look reminded me of every public promise I had made to protect her choice. I climbed 1 step toward the platform. Malcolm lifted the relic key. "Confess ownership, surrender the Hearthmere charter, and I end this cleanly." "Cleanly," I said. "You keep using that word for burning people alive. It does not improve the act." One worker near the well laughed. Malcolm's mouth tightened. "Good." Public ridicule made him less careful. "Read the charter clause," I told Silas. Silas looked terrified, but he stepped forward with the oilcloth packet against his chest. "The Hearthmere Charter recognizes protected witch citizens as free persons under town witness," he called. His voice shook at first and steadied by the final words. "No surrender, seizure, or sentence stands while direct witnesses to staged harm are present and unheard." The charter could not physically stop Malcolm. It could force the argument into public view. He had dragged Sloane into the square and demanded fear from everyone at once. Now the same witnesses could hear the evidence together. Malcolm's smile thinned. "A heretic charter does not bind the Silver Sanctum." "Then it should not scare you when witnesses speak," I said. 2 sharp bell strikes answered from the wall. Piper cleared the side street parapet, hit the stones hard, rolled, and came up holding the missing oilcloth packet above her head. Behind her came refugees from the Brindle River line, workers, and 2 guards who had stood near Damon's shields. Piper was pale, filthy, and struggling for breath. "Third packet copied," she said. "Sideline heard. River Road heard. And for the record, your brother's shields absolutely folded inward." Damon's face changed before he could polish it. The second witness ruse had worked before Malcolm could stop it. Malcolm snapped, "Silence her!" Gideon moved before Damon's soldiers did. His guard line stepped between Piper and the pale-robed men, and this time no one waited for my brother's permission. The crowd saw that too. The town guard had just chosen the charter in front of the prince with the cleaner coat. Sage used the same heartbeat. She dropped her weight against the guard holding her, took the pain in her shoulder without making a sound, and drove her heel into the side of Malcolm's relic case. The case skidded across the platform. A narrow bottom drawer sprang loose and spilled its contents onto the planks. False witness tokens, pale wax strips, oiled dark cloth, folded message scraps tied with the same dark thread Sage had pulled from the courier line. Nobody moved at first. The square looked from the spilled evidence to the silver robes around it. People understood that the relic case held the same materials used in the earlier frames. Silas recovered first because the man loved records more than survival and had somehow made that a virtue. He held up the token from Sloane's first execution. Same witness mark. Then he held up the sickness notice. Same wax. Then he pointed at the oilcloth. Same stain as the livestock frame. He stopped there. He did not lecture. He did not need to. The crowd had hands, eyes, and a fresh memory of Sloane saving people Malcolm wanted dead. Staged, the rescued mill worker said. A refugee woman lifted the child June had saved. You called her evil while she held the gate. Another worker pointed at Damon. And he kept the road shut. More witnesses spoke across the square. Malcolm had wanted one confession from me. Instead, he got a town comparing evidence. Silas looked offended by the disorder and proud of the result. Damon turned his horse toward the road. No banner leaves, I said. Gideon did not look away from the platform. South line, hold! Refugees and workers closed the road before Damon's soldiers could clear it. They did not attack. They stood with picks and spear shafts and refused to move. Damon pulled his reins tight. Everett, he said, low enough that only the front of the square heard the panic under the manors. This has gone too far. You left children outside your shield line, I said. You passed that point a while ago. Malcolm looked from Damon trapped at the road, to the open drawer, to the crowd turning against him, and finally dropped the holy voice. You stupid people, he shouted. You think fear keeps itself alive? You think border towns obey before they are shown what waits in the dark? It was not a complete confession, but it was enough. Malcolm admitted that fear was something he deliberately maintained to control border towns. He jabbed the relic key into the collar's hanging chain and twisted. The nullstone gave a low, cold pulse. The ritual tower behind the stake flared silver white. Out on the ridge, the shapes that had been circling after the broken wave turned toward the square at once. I did not know how the relic worked then. I did not need to. Malcolm turned the key, the tower flared, and the beasts changed direction toward the platform. Every witness saw the sequence. The crowd broke backward. Sloane stayed on her feet. That is what I remember most. Sloane's hands were empty, and Nullstone locked her throat, but she planted her boots on the planks and refused to give the crowd the panic Malcolm wanted. I ran. Malcolm shouted for his men. Damon shouted for his horse. The first beast cleared the lower wall gap and hit the outer square in a spray of mud. Gideon sent 2 guards toward it, but the platform was the target. Malcolm had collared Sloane beside the active tower so he could blame her for the attack he had triggered. I reached Sloane and put both hands on the collar. The evidence lay scattered at Malcolm's feet. He held the key, and the lock stayed at Sloane's throat. We had no safe solution. Gideon, I said, break the lock. Gideon stared at the collar. If I slip, I hold it still. Sloane looked at my hands on the nullstone, then at Gideon's blade. Her voice was thin but steady. Do it. She trusted my timing. In my old life, people had trusted me with unwanted work and convenient blame. This was different. Sloane was trusting me with her body. I held the collar steady and followed the plan despite my fear. Gideon struck once with the back edge of his short sword. The lock cracked but held. Sloane's throat jerked under my hands. Malcolm lunged for the keychain, and Sage kicked his ankle hard enough to make him stumble. The second strike split the lock. The collar opened. Its broken edge sliced my palm when I tore it away, but Sloane was free. Heat rushed back into the square. Sloane inhaled sharply. Fire surged from her hands, bright enough to make every guard step back. Malcolm and his pale-robed men stood within reach. Damon remained trapped at the road. Sloane could have burned the people who put her on that platform. She chose not to. She turned her palm upward and sent the fire straight into the ritual tower. The tower burned from the inside out. Silver strips snapped. Oil-black rope shriveled. The pull on the beasts broke mid-charge, and the first one slammed into Sloane's heat wall instead of the crowd. Gideon and the guards drove spears into its side. Workers hooked ropes around its legs. It fell hard enough to shake the platform. The second beast veered toward Sage. June moved. June could not stand, so she crawled. The child she had saved held her sleeve while 2 refugees helped her reach Sage. June pressed one shaking hand to Sage's wounded shoulder and used only enough healing to stop the bleeding. Then she collapsed against the stones, breathing and alive. Sage looked at her, then at me. She needs to stop. She did, I said. Help her back. Sage helped June back with her one working arm. She gave no speech. The charter protected June, and Sage acted on it. Sloane's fire cut across the platform again, low and controlled, not at the crowd, not at the helpless, at the burning tower, the charging beast and the relic chain Malcolm still tried to drag back under his robe. The second beast caught flame along its shoulder and turned into Gideon's spear line. The third shape on the ridge stopped when the tower collapsed, then disappeared back into the smoke. The final wave ended because Sloane chose restraint when revenge was available, and Hearthmere fought beside her. Malcolm did not save us. Damon did not rescue us. Malcolm stumbled back from the burning tower. His robes were scorched at the hem. The crowd parted for him for the wrong reason now. Not reverence, evidence. She is proving my warning, he shouted. Look at the fire. Sloane lowered her hand. The ritual tower was ash. The crowd was alive. The platform was not. I am looking, the rescued millworker said. The worker's answer hurt Malcolm's claim more than anything I had said. Silas lifted the drawer scraps and spoke over the noise. Witness tokens, stage notices, Damon sealed scraps and relic bait. Recorded before the square. Damon snapped. Those scraps prove nothing against me. Piper, still bent over with both hands on her knees, raised one finger. Your road guards heard you order the carts protected. The refugee woman with the child stepped forward. I heard it. One of Gideon's guards said. I saw the shields fold inward. The crowd did not gasp. They agreed. Damon's version had lost its audience. He looked at me, no longer protected by the status my borrowed memories attached to him. The square had stopped being impressed by his polish. Brother, Damon said, we can settle this inside Hearthmere Keep. No, I said, you liked public authority when refugees were outside the shields. You can have public consequence too. The answer was petty and correct. I allowed myself both. I ordered Gideon to disarm Damon's soldiers at the road and hold the command carts for witness review. I ordered Malcolm's relic case sealed in Silas's custody. Then I looked at Malcolm on the platform and gave the order I had wanted to give every time he used holiness as a knife. Bind him, I said. Same square, no torch. Gideon put Malcolm on his knees where Sloane had been dragged and tied his wrists. Nobody cheered. The town was not watching a revenge burning. It was watching an accused man face witnesses without a torch. Sloane stepped off the platform on her own. I offered my uninjured hand. She looked at it, looked at the bleeding one, and took the clean hand with the careful irritation of someone who would later complain that I had chosen the least efficient way to keep my fingers. Still no owner? She asked. Never was, I said. Her grip tightened once. Then do not call this your victory. I looked across the square. Sage held June upright. Piper waved away help while clearly needing it. Silas gripped the evidence and Gideon blocked Damon with the calm of a man who had finally chosen which orders mattered. Everyone around them had seen a witch save Hearthmere twice. Our victory, I said. Sloane nodded. Better. That exchange mattered more to me than any coronation could have. By dawn, the last blight beast near the road was dead or gone. The side gate still stood. Refugees slept inside Hearthmere instead of freezing outside Damon's shield line. June was unconscious for half a day and irritable for the next 3, which meant she was recovering. Sage stayed close to the records. Piper repeated the story of her witness run with increasing personal glory. Malcolm did not burn. He had wanted fire for Sloane. I gave him tied wrists, public witnesses, and every stage token laid out for the town to inspect. That consequence fit his crimes better. Damon did not ride out under white banners. His soldiers were disarmed by the people they had tried to command. His carts were opened in public, and their food and blankets went first to the refugees he had abandoned. I enjoyed watching that consequence reach him. The royal seal from Crownmere arrived later, after Silas, Piper, and 3 stubborn witnesses sent the evidence down the Brindle River route. King Caspian stripped Damon of the border claim and summoned me to answer for Hearthmere in person. The order did not save us. It only acknowledged, late, that Hearthmere had saved itself. The Hearthmere Charter stayed law. Not perfectly. Fear did not vanish because Malcolm was tied up and I finally acted like a ruler. Some people still crossed the street when Sloane passed. Others whispered when Sage appeared or June touched a wound. But the whispers now competed with public records, living refugees, a burned relic tower, and proof that free witches had saved the square. Weeks later, we rebuilt the execution platform into an oath ground. We removed the stake and chains. A flat stone held the charter, and anyone accused could stand where the whole town heard the case. Sloane stood beside me when the first witch signed under the charter. She did not stand behind me. She did not hold fire for decoration. She stood with her arms folded, watching every witness like she was ready to remember their faces forever. You really did hire the witch they wanted dead, she said quietly. Best terrible staffing decision of my second life. She looked at me, and the corner of her mouth almost moved. Sloane still rationed smiles carefully. Partner, she said, not staff. That hit harder than the crowd, the seal or Damon's face when his carts opened. Partner, I said. I had woken in a useless prince's body with a crowd demanding I burn her. Months later, I stood in the same square while Hearthmere swore by a law that said she belonged to no one. The town was alive. The witches were named. Damon was stripped. Malcolm was exposed. Sloane was free beside me by choice. For the first time in either life, being useful did not feel like being used.